Hey, what's up, everyone? Normal America's show. Got a good show for you lined up today. A somber day. Again, looks like there was an attack on two National Guardsmen today. Uh, I heard conflicting reports, but it appears as if they're both deceased. Reports are just coming in, but there has been a suspect that's been officially named, and it looks as if this was an Afghan national that came in around 2021. But be careful with any of the details, as they could absolutely change. So we'll talk about that tonight after I'm doing a show with Jason Mironchuk on Mironchuk Now. We're going to be talking about Christian nationalism. So we'll start with that and then transition into sort of my normal show where we'll talk more about this incident and see if there's more information that's been gleaned as of later tonight. But for now, I'll just say, obviously, prayers to the families of the victims. Absolutely horrendous. It sounds like one an unarmed National Guardsman actually was the first person to confront this person and used a pocket knife. He did not have a firearm. Used a pocket knife, uh, but allegedly the person yelled "Allah Akbar" during the attack. So plenty of time to talk about this later. But just prayers out to the family. Horrible. The day before Thanksgiving. You think about this family of these National Guardsmen probably about to celebrate, coming together with family, and now this that they'll have to live with the rest of their lives. So absolutely horrific event. Um, I don't know how much of I'll be talking about this with Mirnichuk here, but like I said, we're going to go through with the regularly scheduled program. And then in my show tonight, after that, which I'm not going to end the show, it'll just continue. We'll jump into this topic. So, absolutely horrible. So, I don't have the super chat bar up because it never looks good when you're doing someone else's show to have that up. So, I will still be reading all super chats after the show. JJ Beans, the OG, $5 says late fees. Thank you so much. And the great How Long Nate, $50 says early payday. Looks like sad drama. Yeah, it absolutely does. So, just absolute craziness. Really is. Like I said, we'll see if more details come out. We'll have more to say. But I'm going to try to hop backstage and see if we have to do any audio checks or anything like that. There we go. What's up, man? Good, good. Hey, I'm just talking behind the scenes, getting ready for the show here, so we'll be ready to go here soon.
Hi, Rob.
It's great to be here. How's it going tonight?
I'm excited. Are you excited? You have Turkey Day.
I am very excited. So yes, here in the States, we have Thanksgiving tomorrow. So for a fat guy like me, always exciting. Though I am starting a diet after tomorrow because I got this big project coming up in Atlantic City. So I don't want to look like the fattest guy ever, just a fat guy. I'll be happy with that. So starting a little diet.
Yeah. You don't want to be the fattest guy in the room, right? Like that's always I put on some weight over the last year and a half, and it's like you kind of like you're trying to stand at awkward profiles, wearing a lot of black now.
Yeah, you got to have the lines going this way. You don't want the lines going this way in your shirt. Yeah, I get
it. Yeah. You're never really truly in profile. You're always just finding like some sort of like half step.
Yes,
it looks like you have to go to the
yes, yeah, that's good. See, I'm good, but I figure, well, with all that work, I might as well just try to lose some weight. But it's going good. I'm very excited. I know we've had this plan. We've sort of switched the topic a while, but we had this plan for a while now, and I've been very excited. So.
Yeah, originally we were going to do a Nick Fuentes Friend or Fed. I did a members stream on this in case people want to know about it. Had to cancel it because I ended up talking to my priest about the topic, and he's like, you know what? Right now for you, no. And that's not meaning that he's that my priest or my spiritual father, determines my shows, but it's more like on a personal level. He's like, that's a very controversial subject. Maybe stay away from that a little bit and do something less controversial, like Christian nationalism. Why not just talk about that?
Well, first off, who are you?
That holy hand grenade into the room, yeah.
Who are you going to take advice more than your priest, right? So that's as good a person as any that I could think of. So yeah, no problem. It is too. It's funny because going into that show, it's probably better for me we didn't do it too, because I'm sort of heavily criticizing what I saw as sort of establishment Republicans, that instead of pushing back against what I see the excesses of the left and how serious that is, there's more infighting. So it was kind of weird where I was like, oh, and by the way, I'll be talking about this very subject, in the future. So it actually works out well because, I think there's more folk. Now, it's one thing for folks like me and you, there's sort of online commentary to discuss these things. It's another thing that when this is the primary focus of our senators, and that's a little different. But nonetheless, it worked out, swimmingly.
Well, we can certainly discuss Fuentes a little bit here, because it's a very interesting year, right? It's been a weird year, hasn't it, Rob? I don't know about you, but on a personal level, and then just the exterior level out there. I remember when Tucker first started calling him out and calling him, said he thinks he's a little homosexual living in the basement. I'm like, that's a push from the office. And I use a lot of wrestling terms. I'm like, there's some kayfabe and there's a push from the office, and they're gonna start pushing that kid, and they did. And that was before Charlie Kirk. So
yeah, it's isn't it weird? Like to look back now, my son, he'll be 5 here in January. It's weird to me about how time is so fast and so slow simultaneously. Like the birth of my son seems forever ago and also seems like yesterday. For me, in May, I was, I worked the same job doing home health care with adults with disability 14 years. And I left the job and started working for the Crucible and streaming full time. And it seems like a lifetime ago. It really does. It feels like I've been streaming every night for like the past 20 years. And it's really just been the past 6 months. So it has been a crazy year for me personally, in a good way. But yeah, certainly our political landscape, we still aren't a year into Trump's second term. And look at all that's happened so far. It's just insane.
Well, let's talk about that for a little bit, because you just did a stream. I kind of perused it late last night and a little bit this morning, talking about black pills, let's say Republican black bills. Maybe, I don't know if you're comfortable making this distinction between, like, let's say Trump and MAGA and the Republican Party. I know they're obviously, horse and cart, but I think there are some distinctions. My friend and brother from another podcast, Matthew Erickson, who you two should probably talk at some point, has chosen to go, and he's received a lot of criticism for this, but he's chosen to go, look, all in on Trump and try to find positive things always, right? No effing black pilling, not allowed. We're going to go stream ahead. Every single opportunity that's presented, take it, right? And I'm not saying that that's antithetical to your position, because I don't think that is.
No, it's not. No.
But I do think over the last, let's say, month or so, there has been sort of that disparaging note about things, especially around Zionism and the growing awareness, and this is getting us back to Nick Fuentes as the lightning rod to this, the growing awareness of how embedded Zionism has become, especially within the neocon base, And it's not just the Jays. It's, there's a lot of Christians who are Christian Zionists and all this other hoo-ha. And it's coming to a head, I think, because, Tucker Carlson's taking that ball and running with it and scoring touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. So let's all pray for Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
Because he's shining some light on some things that do not want to be seen.
It's crazy. So I think that, sometimes people go too far. We're not talking about Fuentes as the whole show, but I think he goes too far with a lot of his criticisms of Jewish people or Israel in general. But I definitely think there's truth to the matter that there is a lot of influence from foreign countries, in particular Israel, into our country. Now, don't conflate this with saying then that the enemies of Israel are my ally. That's not true at all. In fact, I was talking to a friend yesterday on my show. You could probably draw a circle as a Venn diagram. It would be just one circle of the lefties on college campuses that were shouting from the river to the sea and people that cheered Charlie Kirk's death and that would attack like sort of his vigils on college campuses. So these aren't people that I particularly like. I'm not a deep thinker. I'm just a redneck that's lived in sort of a blue-collar area my entire life. I happen to be pretty good at debate. I did it in college. But man, I'm so tired of seeing the people that I respect the most, whether it be people that fought valiantly in places like Afghanistan or places like Iraq that are struggling. As my neighborhood, businesses leave and leave and leave, and it's dying. And as I'm seeing these problems in real time, and they get worse every year, and certainly, look, I'll defend Trump and Republicans here by extension. It was certainly worse under Biden. Things were accelerating at a bad pace under Biden. But still, when you see these problems and you elect this guy Trump, and you're like, there's going to be a hyper-focus back home now, and people like these and these blue-collar workers, and it seems like those are the last priority, and it's more the priorities of Ukraine or the priorities of Israel, whether that means bombing Iran or helping to solve the Israel-Palestinian conflict. And I'm tired of it, and I think people are noticing that there's at least a huge branch of the Republican Party that's where their number one priorities are, and it's becoming a very popular message to say we're tired of this. And Tucker's tapping into that, and a lot of other people, Candace Owens is tapping into that, Nick Fuentes is tapping in. This doesn't mean that I agree with all of their prospective solutions, but they're certainly tapping into people getting wore out, because what they see is, and Israel's the flashpoint for this, but it's not the only one. They see that the interest of people outside of this country come first and foremost when it comes to even our party, the Republican Party, and even the Trump administration as they see it.
Yeah, I've done a lot of work kind of highlighting the City of London interests that gets into geopolitics. In my show that I do with Jim Jotras, and just in general kind of centers more around examining geopolitics, especially Ukraine-Russia war. Mm-hmm. Mironchuk is a Ukrainian name, so there's a link. So we've been doing a lot of that. Now, when we do those kind of examinations, and if you watched our recent turned into a debate with Tom Luongo and Jim Jotras, Tom's really highlighted that whole idea that the American Empire, this idea of the American Empire is a bit of a misnomer, because really the British Empire didn't collapse in 1945. It kind of went into the shadows, and has still been controlling things, especially in terms of trade networks and in terms of finances, ever since then. Right. Just one flashpoint is that as of March of this year was the first time America had full control of its currency, because there used to be a system called LIBOR, the London Interbank Overnight Exchange Rate, which basically sets your exchange rates and the value of your currency, and that was all determined from banks in London. That wasn't determined out of America. It wasn't determined, by I'm sure maybe they talked to some Americans, or some Americans were present in the meeting, but that didn't happen. So the new system, SOFR, actually puts control of Americans' finances back in America for the first time since its creation.
It's crazy.
It never had that control. So if you think about that data note and they go, well, why would a global American empire, right? Why would they have their money basically being controlled out of banks in London? That doesn't make any sense, right? They would have seized control of that back in 1945, with the Marshall Plan and all the rest of it. So there's other things going on. And I think just to, offer a little bit of a data point, right, to track, because we'll see how these things go. And I can't make any clear predictions, but I do think that we're going to start seeing in 2026 a massive return domestically, anyways, in terms of policy.
I hope
the Ukraine-Russia war is going to be pretty much over one way or the other. I don't know what's going on with Israel and Iran, if that flares up again, but I think we're going to be into a financial situation that's going to demand eyes back at home, and that I think has been the overall reaching plan to get USD back to onshore, back into America, and to prepare for this sort of situation.
I hope so. And listen, I think that what you're saying makes sense. And you think of other things like I think Trump, when it comes to sort of Europe and London, I think they despise Trump. And that's largely
Mhm.
because I think that they reliably had relationships with sort of the old guard Republican and Democratic Party that they knew they could continue the relationship to basically be shadow people that are sort of having, if not total control, having a lot of input, thereby forcing US policy to be focused more on being generous to maybe Europe and other people in the world more so than the people of the United States. And I think what happens is when you see the high watermark after World War II, granted, Europe's devastated because of the war. The United States comes out, I mean, obviously tragic the young men that died fighting for the United States. But as far as our infrastructure, it's almost totally intact after World War II. And we come across as basically, the superpower along with the Soviet Union, which obviously we were able to outlast. Part of the agreement was, well, we'll basically be the world police. And, that's part of the sort of agreement that the United States had. And not only that, we became the world reserve currency. But the problem with that is you started to see sort of an outsourcing of the wealth of the United States from the working class to sort of the rest of these countries actually benefiting mightily from that. And I think that Trump is someone that they saw as possibly being an impediment to sort of that relationship as it's been going for the past, half a century, if not longer. And I think that if we ever got to the bottom of things, we would see that even something that I talk about all the time, which is the Russiagate investigation, that started in London. That was MI6. That's when you hear the Maltese professor, Joseph Misfit, that was at the beginning of all of that, that sort of talked to George Papadopoulos and was like, I can get you in contact with Russians, that started the entire thing. Everybody that knew that guy in his life was like, that guy's Western intelligence. That guy has connections to sort of United Kingdom intelligence. And that's what we'll find. And then the question becomes, what do you do when your supposed greatest ally in the United Kingdom is actively subverting one of the candidates for president and then a man who ends up becoming a two-term president? It's going to be very
Yeah.
interesting. And, it makes you wonder how much Trump knows and how much people in his administration know. And would that sort of facilitate the further breaking away of like any control that London has in the United States?
Well, I think the selection for Russia was by design. This was again before. I mean, the civil war in Ukraine had already started by that point, but it had just started rolling. Crimea had been taken in 2014, taken, annexed, whatever you want to call it. So there was certainly a buildup there. But I think the objective, and again, this is building off Tom Luongo's work, was that the idea was to collapse everything, right? The plan A, and this is from Davos, and you would live in the pods, eat the bugs, and be happy, own nothing and be happy.
Right.
The general idea is that you have this bond market that's set up to facilitate international trade and investment, especially now we're starting to see the contractions happening in Japan, most notably, which was basically set up after during the Marshall Plan to become a investment receiver country, right? It's not a real economy in that sense, or a real country anymore, really, in that sense. But anyways, so you have this whole system that's basically setting up globalism, and everyone's profiting and yada yada yada, and great prosperity, yippee ki right? The biggest problem is that attached to the bond market is the derivatives market, because you can like buy and sell and bet on bonds and do all these really, really weird, crazy things with bonds. So there's the actual bond market number we can figure out, the international bond market. And then there's the derivatives market. That number gets up to like $4 quadrillion trillion. Like we don't even know how big that is, because it's all just, a lot of times it's penny stocks, it's garbage bond. It's like, it's insane. That's the elephant on toothpicks. And that's the VIC that's getting called in. And we're starting to see it coming in from Japan, and I think it's going to hit Italy and Germany and all the Marshall Plan countries first, and then the whole enchilada gets called in. So with that in mind, I think the idea was, well, we're going to collapse Russia, take all those assets, and keep kicking this can down the road. Because an interesting data point is during COVID, during the lockdowns, America funneled over something like $5 trillion or more into European offshore banks. Why? Why? Let's just keep the banks solvent. So this has been the thing, right? and now it's coming to a head.
And here's the thing. I don't think I've done as extensive research as you liking it directly to London, right? But certainly I think that if you pay attention, even if you're just looking at this as sort of a surface area, you can see that people that are in charge of sort of our culture and our political institutions, they're globalist. They don't really have any attachment to the people or the geography of the United States, like the actual land. They don't care. Like they just don't. And you see this in all sorts of things. You see it in sort of the immigration policies, even people that are conservatives, that there's a lot of stuff I like Vivek. It's clear when you listen to him now that he's sort of like, well, the United States is just this big machine, right? And who could be the best cog to input the best GDP at the end of the day? That's what matters. It's not like your cultural heritage, having a connection to the founding fathers or the founding documents, living in the land that your family worked for decades and decades. None of that matters to these people. And when you start to look at it like that, these policies all start to make sense. Because I think people make the mistake of thinking that it's certainly true. There are a huge swath of incompetent people in our institutions and positions of leadership, but most of it's not incompetence. Most of it's, I don't even know if you could say corruption. It's just their goals are completely different than your goals as an average constituent. They don't really care about you. It's not that they hate you. They just don't care. You're just there. If you get in their way, then they'll deal with you. But otherwise, you're just there. And if you could benefit them, great. And if not, that's why it's like when we look at something like the mass numbers of illegals that came in under Biden, like I don't like I still see people struggle with this. Like, how could Biden have been so dumb? But it has nothing to do with stupidity. They were getting the exact result that they wanted. That's exactly what was happening. It wasn't a mistake that they rescinded these executive orders on day one, and then all of a sudden we saw tens of millions of illegals coming in, and they were just like, oh, shucks, what do we do? Like, they turned the faucet on, and then we're like, well, we can't turn it off. They could have turned it off, as Biden proved, during the election cycle anytime they wanted. This was intentional. And there's a litany of other things when it comes to economic policy like this, when it comes to sort of voting policy and the things we do. These things aren't accidents. They're intentional. And if you start to say, like, what does it make sense that these are intentional? And you come to the conclusion, it's because they don't really care about the United States. In fact, the United States, in my estimation, is the great impediment to the globalist dream. Working class people in Western nations, whether that be European countries, places like Australia, or in particular the United States, they don't like that. That's an impediment to them. They want the haves and the have-nots. They want you reliant on them, because once you're reliant on the government for your subsistence, then it's harder for you to fight back or to criticize them. And so their dream is this globalist dream, right, where they could basically have one system of government. They don't have to worry about, if you're Bill Gates, you don't have to deal with hundreds of different countries and hundreds of different laws. It's just one country, and you could lobby it, and you could influence it, and you're all good. Once you have your tendrils there, that's all you have to do. And once you realize that that's sort of the most likely explanation, it's like, oh, COVID makes sense. The lockdown policies make sense. The bailing out banks in Europe, yep, that makes sense. The sticking behind the World Health Organization, even when they're saying absurd shit like, it can't spread person to person, this aerial, all of it's like, oh, I get it. It's because our leadership isn't interested in us. They don't give a shit about us. And by the way, if you're listening and you're Democrat, they don't give a shit about you either. They don't care. You're just a useful tool, just like I'm a useful tool to a lot of these Republicans that are globalist minded as well. So, yeah, it's sombering to like sort of realize that's what's going on, but that is it. That's what's happening.
You said something recently on one of your live shows, which I echo something that I'd said. Here in Australia, of course, you have Aboriginal voices and all that stuff. They're trying to make these inroads into government. To have special groups, and it's interesting because it's always the whitest of white Aboriginals, like one, 2 drops in, and you're like, oh yeah, sure, you look exactly like the guy with doing the throat music.
Yeah,
the guy who gets it on the poster, and you, perfect example, right? But we see this happening in Canada and all the rest of it as well. Now in Canada, they're doing what I thought they were going to do eventually, which is basically buy land gifting.
Yep.
Which is if you've got property on this land, well, guess what? It's owned by the native tribe, and you're paying
tough
rent
luck.
to them,
Your ancestors were bad people. Tough luck. Yeah, that's basically it.
Right.
Yeah.
But the thing that's coming down the pike, and I think what a lot of these progressives just don't get it, or maybe they do, and they're just trying to steal the copper from the walls, right? Who knows? But what they don't realize is if your country, or down here, let's say we'll just use Australia as an example. I personally believe that China is going to take this thing. with probably within this century, if all things being equal. At that point, if China takes over, they're going to care about this much about Aboriginal voices or any. They're not going to feel guilty. They're not going to feel. You're going to raise your concerns and go, oh yeah, cool story, and off you go. They're going to exclude you. So by not supporting and not getting behind some sort of actual, and we'll call it just nationalist identity, and here's your off-road to Christian nationalism, without getting behind some sort of national identity and getting your collective crap together, you're opening the door to people who just don't care about you. Like, not even like they won't even pay lip service to you. You're not even going to be a preferred group or protected. White liberal women, you're screwed. Like, literally.
It'll be worse than indifference. You'll actively be an enemy. This is right. So this is something I learned from debate, right? Oftentimes what happens is there's different values that we put on things, right? And so, for example, me and you may have a debate, and let's say the debate's on like sort of, something I know very little about, like we'll say sort of cryptocurrency, right? Now, your value might be a value that you're talking about of like financial stability, and that's the key value that you're pushing for. And mine might be something more like financial liberty, right? And lack of control of central government systems with control of currency. We could both win that argument, right? You could argue my side is the correct side if my value is the one to be favored. But if your value is the one to be favored, then you win that argument. So one of the things that I learned to do in debate in college is you need to argue, even if you're right, even under your value system, here's why you should prefer my argumentation on this specific issue. And so one of the things you'll see when I'm like working with people in the crucible or when I'm debating and it's against a secular humanist, one of the arguments that I'm making against them all the time, and they don't have a good answer to this, is if you don't get behind sort of some sort of Christian nationalist system, and by that, we'll define what we mean by that. But if you don't embrace Christianity, right, and living under that system, the very progressive groups that you claim to care about, like the LGBT, they're going to be overran by Islam or China or something like that. And they're not going to give a shit. They're not going to be as sort of live and let live as Christians are. Sure, a lot of Christians are against something like gay marriage, but they ain't throwing gay people off roofs. It ain't happening. They're not even credibly suggesting that we should make homosexuality a crime. They're just saying, like, culturally, we should shame it. It's not something to be celebrated. We don't want it taught in our schools or celebrated in our schools. And maybe, the economic relationship of the government being involved in the contract of marriage, maybe gays shouldn't be allowed to do that. But that's it. But the problem is, because Christians are sort of the only group, the way I see it, that has a chance to fight back in a long-term way against Islam due to declining birth rates. The birth rates amongst the secular humanists are in the basement. It's not replaceable, and they're never going to be able to. And it makes sense when you think about it. What do they have to offer? If you're a secular humanist, why would you ever have children, right? You're basically a materialist. And it's going to be real hard to convince 99% of people that it financially is beneficial to have children. It's just not, right? And if your goal is, but I want to travel the world and I want to own the best cars, it's hard to square that with having children. It's how having children helps with that. So Christians have there's a message of self-sacrifice. There's a message of leaving the world better for future generations. There's a message of being a husband, a father. And that's why you see the Orthodox and the Catholics, you see their birth rates are higher. And then as you get to other denominations of Christians, they start to go down. And the secular humanists are in the basement. But they have no way to fight back against what they're going to do 3 generations from now when the entire country in the United States becomes Dearborn, Michigan. And then where will your progressive rights be? They're going to laugh at you. They're going to be like, we don't give a shit. Are you kidding me? You're not going to shame us. We don't have the same empathy that the Christians had that are like, listen, hate the sin, not the sinner. No. We throw the sinner off the building. That's what we'll do.
Right. I mean, and also just thinking more long term for these people, it's like, look, if let's say you're 20 years old or 25 years old and you're a secular humanist, you're going, it doesn't, you're not thinking that far ahead. If we're talking, let's say in two generations, let's say this happens, right? America becomes a caliphate of some sort. You'll be like comfortably in your 50s and 60s. Now, as an older man, let me just warn you something that things don't work as well as you think. So if you're thinking like, oh, we'll fight back, I'm like, with a bad back, probably not, man. I got heel spurs and stuff. I'm not like, I'll defend my family, but I'm not like marching out there to the front lines. You wouldn't want me there. So it's like you got to keep those things in mind, that eventually you're going to get old and you're going to need a community, and you're going to need people around there to take care of you or help you, or in any way, which way you can. And if you deteriorate society to the point where it's all against all, or one group takes the winners begin to abuse the losers, and you're on the losing side, that's not where you want to be in your 60s and your 70s. Like that's just really.
Well, that's when you hear. I mean, I don't know how much you heard of some of the debates at DebateCon, but my goodness, they all run together. There were so many against secular humanists. So let me make sure I get this straight. I think it was the debate with Richard Carrier. Andrew was doing with Richard Carrier, who's a secular humanist. By the way, seemed like a nice guy. So he stuck around with us, and it's not really an attack on him, the individual, but sort of the idea he had. And when he was asked about birth rates, his solution was import people. Just bring in people, largely from the third world. And that's what he talked about. He was like, well, Africa's still having a lot of kids. I'm sorry to tell you, those people aren't going to give a shit about you. When you rely on, you're like, well, I'm a 65-year-old secular humanist, and so we don't have enough people in this country to take care of the elderly population. I know, we'll bring in people from the third world. They're not going to care about you. They're not, and you're going to find yourself in a very scary position where now you've imported people from a vastly different culture than you in order to take care of you. And many of them are going to view you with contempt, not just indifference, but with actual contempt, because a lot of the language that we hear, many of these secular humanists, the language of the left of, white people or the United States or Christians, insert your evil oppressor group, that have these historical sins, well, guess what? A lot of the people that are from different cultures, they believe that shit. And a lot of what you see from the left here, it's couched in this language of like, oh, we're empathetic and we care about other populations. But most of it's just hatred. Orwell talked about this, right? Like I talked about this story a lot. Jordan Peterson, back before he was working for the Daily Wire and stuff, he told this story, I think on Joe Rogan's show, and it's about the book, The Road to Wigan Pier. Orwell writes this book, and he's back in the day, and you'll know this, but back in the day, they used to commission books like as serials. So there'd be like a magazine, and they put a chapter out like every month or whatever. And so these socialists in London, they commissioned Orwell to do this book. And Wigan Pier was like this sort of coal mining town, and it was horrible. And the first half of the book, he goes, and it's just like, the first thing he noticed was none of the women had teeth. Like no one had teeth. And he's like, why don't you have teeth? And they're like, because they're nothing but a nightmare. They get infected, we rip them out, right? They're just, and he's like explaining how it's so brutally cold, and there would only be like one outhouse, and you'd have to walk like half a mile in the snow just to use the restroom. And the conditions in these mines, it's just disgusting. It's horrible. And from the socialist perspective, you're like, yes, the plight of the working man, right? But then the second half of the book, he's like, the socialists that paid to send me here, they don't care about these people at all. They do not care. They just care about the people above them. They care about the people with more power and influence than them. And so they're pretending to care about the plight of these people, but in reality, they don't care at all. That's what you see of so much of the modern left. And unfortunately, secular humanism falls into a lot of this. I'm assuming there could be a right-wing secular humanist, but it would be a rare bird indeed, I think. But a lot of it's they couch it in like what's about equality. It's not. It's about hatred. Feminist, it's about hatred of men. Like sort of racial politics, it's about hatred of white people. Religious grievances, it's about hatred of Christianity. And geopolitical, it's about hatred of the United States. And they're seen as this great colonizer. And when you rely on the people that believe that to their core, that our country's been exploited by the United States, and now, generationally, it's our time to get back. And you're like, we're going to import those people, well, you're going to end up in a very dark place. And I don't think that these lefty, as a project, the left might be okay with it, but are you okay with it when it's you? When it's you in the nursing home that's relying on people that barely speak the language, that fucking hate you? And so the waning years of your life are going to be people that actively despise you? And I've seen it, man. I work home health care with people that need significant care. It's no good if you're relying on someone that doesn't deeply care about you. It's a very dark place.
Yeah. So I think there's an obvious on road to get into Christian nationalism and definitions. Before we do, though, let's do a little bit of grift. I know we've been talking about grifters, but hey, we can be good grifters too. That's I got a goal set up on YouTube. If we hit that 20 by the time we end the stream, I will challenge robnoerr to a debate in the future over some sort of topic yet to be disclosed.
That sounds great.
So hit that goal, and I will challenge Rob to a debate. There we go.
Love it.
Wipe the floor with him. See, I've been hiding my power levels.
There we go.
That's the whole thing.
That's the way to do it, though. Yeah, you don't let them see you coming. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, Christian nationalism. Here's the setup. When I first heard the term, probably about 2 years or so ago, I had been hearing it coming out of certain mouths that I automatically dismissed. There was who's that guy? He's a non-dom. He looks like he should be on a PGA golf tour. Big beard. And,
yeah.
They wheel him out as the crazy Christian occasionally.
Yes.
Because he'll just say all the things. They go, see, look at the Christians. That's what you're standing for. And it's like, we wouldn't let him in. What are you talking about? He wouldn't even fit into my parish. I forget his name, but it doesn't really matter. I heard him talking about it, and then you hear it, burbling up from those corners. So I kind of just dismissed it as just okay, this is a made up term that they're popularizing to sing some mud on Christian shoes and make us the boogie woogies. However, then I started hearing Andrew Wilson talk about it, and I've heard you talk about it. Or it's come up in debates as well. And I know Andrew's debated quite a bit. I just watched him debate Connor from Counterpoints on it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. So I'm willing to be convinced. Now, I kind of fall into the Jay Dyer form of. I'm not even saying that Jay Dyer. I don't want to put words into Jay's mouth here, but I know that Jay and I have agreed more or less that the problem with Christian nationalism, as far as we see it, is which Christianity are we talking about here? Are we just lumping everything in together? And who does that favor? Because that gets into I won't get into theological terms, but there's concerns about that. There's even concerns with the Orthodox and Roman Catholics right now, right? So
sure.
So who's taking the lead? Which Christian fundamental ethics and virtues are we promoting here? Obviously, what's happening with Lutherans and a lot of the Anglicans, I don't even consider them the Christians really at this point. You're putting female archbishops in. It's like, no, sorry, dismissed. So there's that to contend with. And I'm going to throw it over to you, Rob. Just one last thing though,
sure.
Because then I became aware. But then, as I'm hearing Andrew debate it, I became aware that I'm putting a lot of problems. I'm front loading the problems, right? And that's a peacetime mentality, and we need to get our heads out of that, because this is war. We are at war. We have been at war for a very long time, whether it be spiritual or actual physical. It's manifesting itself. It's becoming much more obvious. This is the age of the vengeful son, as I keep talking about, and it's coming for you. Like, it's going to be in your streets. It's going to be in your family. It's going to be very prescient very, very soon. So if we're looking for solutions, worrying about what might happen 20, 30 years down the road, it's fine to think about them, but we need to start maybe instituting some solutions now. So that's where I'm more like, you know what? Let's get Rob on. Talk to me about the Christian nationalism thing. Maybe I'm more all ears than I think I am.
Well, so it's a great, you framed this very well. The first time that I actually thought about Christian nationalism in a serious way was debating Andrew Wilson, and that debate, I heavily focused on what would the particular denomination of Christian nationalism be, and what are some of the things, even if I accept my opponents, at that point, Andrew, who I'm friends with at the time, but still, I would say, I don't know that I want your exact interpretation of Christianity to be what the law is in the United States. And we focused on things like whether or not it is technically... It's a word that starts with R, and it means basically the grotesque sexual assault of a woman, right? Whether or not that should be a sin, or it should be a law that's violated if it is a married couple. In other words, can you commit that crime against your wife? And I said, see, because we will have sort of religious differentiations of what we think that means, I don't know that I want that enshrined in the law, because I don't want a system where a husband could get away doing that sort of action. And if it was not his wife, we would clearly be like, yep, it's just his girlfriend that qualifies. But if it's his wife, all of a sudden it doesn't qualify as that crime. Now, I've since understood that there's sort of nuance to that opinion that maybe I wasn't thinking about, but nonetheless, that was the thrust of most of our debate. And I think it was a productive debate. I think that ultimately, though, that you're absolutely right. it's time to look at where we stand. Inside me, there are two wolves. There is the libertarian adjacent wolf, and then there is the Christian nationalist wolf. And the libertarian adjacent, and I, came from being almost libertarian to less and less and less and less and less. And I think being a father, yes, being a father really propelled me further away from liberty. I still respect many of the libertarians, but I would have said to me what I meant by minarchist or libertarian adjacent was this, that my default priority is liberty, right? And so I'm not saying that there's never room for government authority, but we should always start under the assumption of me and you have the right to do what we want until the government argues, listen, here's why you don't hear. So for example, I have the right to travel freely, but the government has the right to tell me you can't drive 200 mile an hour outside the school zone, right? And I accept that. I'm like, okay, I understand why. I default under the assumption of liberty, but I understand why it's necessary when there's a compelling case made at times to be like, yeah, we have to restrict that. Totally get it. However, what I'm seeing now is that I don't know that that mindset's capable of fighting the fight that we need to fight at this point. That mindset makes sense when we have a bunch of like-minded, homogenous people in our communities. We don't have that anymore. We don't have people that are like, hey, me and you are left and right, but we're both sort of pushing for the same thing. Now it's different. Now there are people actively pushing that they hate me and they hate my way of life. And they'll celebrate when I'm murdered. And they'll mock my wife, as we see occurring to Charlie Kirk. And they'll try to throw us in jail. For things like protesting outside of abortion clinics and things like that. So it seems as if the times have changed. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm a full-on Christian authoritarian that's like, this is it, this is my interpretation of Christianity, and anyone who violates that should be thrown in jail. I'm not suggesting that. When I say Christian nationalism, I merely mean this. Forget about the denomination of Christianity, and I mean that in totality because I'm a very poorly read Christian. In fact, I've just started going to a Catholic church. For years, I considered myself like non-denominational Christian. So I'll be darned if I'm going to sit here and mock people's individual interpretation of Christianity. I'm not going to do that, whatever your sect is at this point. What I'm saying by Christian nationalism is I want a government that is ran by people that have a Christian ethic and are not ashamed of that to use our government to influence culture and law in positive Christ-like manners. Now, we could agree to disagree on sort of what the specifics may look like in a law, and that's fine. There will be fringe issues that a Catholic and a Mormon and a Lutheran and an Orthodox will disagree. But in general, 90% will go in the same direction. And at this point, I think that that is necessary because I feel that our country and in fact the world is becoming so degenerate that we need the Christian principles to be able to push back. And as far as I go, not only do I view Christianity as the truth, that it is literally the truth, but even if I didn't, even if I take the religious precepts out of it and say Christ is the Son of God and all, even if I said, I don't really believe that, it's still, as far as I can see in a secular mindset, the best codified code of moral ethics that has a chance to bring us out of this degeneracy. And so for those reasons, that's what I'm advocating for. This doesn't mean that you have to be a practicing Christian or you're locked up in the United States. I don't think that there's any suggestion that Christians, if they came into power in a serious way in this country, would do this, nor does it mean that everything that is a sin is made illegal. You could still blaspheme God and it would be legal, right? That's fine. Something being immoral is different than saying that it should be illegal. But for me, that's the starting point. The situation we're in now means that we need a codified moral code. And as far as I'm concerned, Christianity is not only the truth, but the best moral code that we could use. And that our country, our founding fathers never intended for our system to be so many non-homogenous people with different cultural values. It's just not workable. And so we need to get back to sort of having a Christian value system to make us cohesive as a country.
Yeah, which is a very compelling argument. Here's I'm going to voice some of my adjunct concerns or add on to this. What I've been coming up with is I call it the liberal frame thesis. I'm not the only one talking about this, but this is kind of what I put together. And basically, I'm saying that inside your mind, there's this box we're going to call it, or a frame. We're going to call it liberalism. Now, most people, when I say liberalism, it becomes a word concept fallacy. You think the left, or you think classic liberalism, or some sort of form of that, right? What I'm saying is that all ideologies born out of certain precept philosophies, mostly coming out of nominalism. So you have nominalism, materialism, nationalism, even liberty, like a lot of these concepts come out of the post-Enlightenment sort of Reformation. From that, you create this frame. So within the frame, you have classic liberalism, libertarianism, fascism, communism, all these ideologies, because Zionism especially, they all distill down to these core philosophies. Now, within each ideology, they have, like, let's say, little levers. So they go, well, we prefer more of this and a little less of this, and so on and so forth, right? But it's still the frame. Now, that frame is a false reality, but it's the reality that you see in the world. It's why if you go anywhere in the world, except for maybe a few other places like Saudi Arabia or a few other notable exceptions, they all have pretty much the exact same governmental system. Like, even in China, it's kind of just, it's set up like a parliament. It operates differently, right? Obviously. They have elections. You can vote for the communists or the communists. It's fine. But they have all these things, right? It looks the same. It may function slightly differently, but the functionality is the same. And they're all materialists, all of them, right? This is the materialist. You take nominalism and you stretch it out 400 years or so. This is what you get. So I'm looking at it sort of as a two-pronged attack. And this is where I think Orthodoxy specifically, but we'll just say Christianity in general, this is where the attack comes, and this is why I've gotten very excited about the debates this past year. I've been starting to pay a laser attention, because while you have the political debates going on, and that's all interesting and good, then you have, even yourself, Jim Bob, Jay Dyer, I know Andrew's done this as well. They're attacking nominalism at its core. They're attacking materialism. The Jay Dyer's done amazing work with TAG, just dismantling this whole, like, you need transcendental arguments. Like, you need to have, you're using metaphysics. You can't we're not going to just grant you them. Defend it, right? You don't have an ontology. Liberalism doesn't grant you that. It's not in Orthodoxy, we have a term called phronema. And phronema is like one of these interesting, words that deal with a lot of things. Some people use it for worldview, but essentially it really means a state of being. So when you have an Orthodox phronema, you are Orthodox in all ways, like constantly. Orthodoxy in the church is informing everything you do, from the moment you get up to the moment you go to bed. So I'm not saying that obviously we can't demand that level of commitment from every single person in the United States or in the West, but that's a starting point. And from that point, that breaks that liberal frame. Mm-hmm. You can't have an ideology and Christianity at the same time, right? And if you do, one wins out.
Yeah.
And usually, so far it's been the ideologies.
And it's difficult. Like, when you think about it now, how complicated sort of our news cycle is, right? Think about it. And so how do you know what's right on any given specific situation if you don't have a framework that you could look at and say, look, it's sort of simple, because I believe that authority comes from a higher power, and I understand that is the correct. Now, that doesn't mean that through a Christian framework, there can't be disagreements on specific nuanced things. For example, you may quite literally, even two Orthodox could sit down and say, okay, what should our trade policy be vis-a-vis Venezuela? You could come to two completely different, decisions on what to do with the same moral guiding framework. So this doesn't solve all sort of disagreement. It's not like we'll become monolithic and it's just one argument, one answer for everything. But you're certainly right. The only group that I found, and Orthodox are the best with this, but Christians in general, again, we'll say, the only group I found that are consistent with their ideology, and which is probably why I have an affinity for them, is sort of the ANCAPs. They're like hardline libertarians. And I used to do these debates on the Crucible. It was called The Arena. It was like a panel debate show. And I would bring on some of my ANCAP friends that would come on. And people would get frustrated with them, because it didn't matter what the topic was. They're going to talk about ANCAP. They're going to talk about the non-aggression principle. And it's like, right, dude, how could we one day be talking about who should we vote for, Trump or Biden? And then the next day we're talking about, like, should OnlyFans be illegal? Or it could be a silly topic like, should we sort of pressure people to lose weight through, like, insulting jokes? And every single time, ANCAP comes up. And it's like, well, because they can't separate their ideology, which is the lens in how they view the world. They can't separate that. The same is true of a good Christian. You can't. Everything you do is from that lens of Christianity. It has to be. If it's not, then are you really acting as a Christian? Now, you could theoretically be a Christian and say, look, I accept that I don't want a theocracy. And so therefore, my particular moral code, I'm not saying should be enforced upon everyone else. And I'm willing to accept that possibly for this diverse group of people we have for a political system, that we can't do that. but you're still viewing things through that lens. And for me, that's actually what I'm talking about when I talk about Christian nationalism is you, the best argument against me, because I'm very milquetoast with this. In fact, I don't even think I like the term Christian nationalism, if I'm quite honest, because it does carry baggage. There are people that hear this and they're like, oh, you're saying that there should be an official state church. And clearly the founding fathers were against that. True, they were against that, but that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm not suggesting. What I'm really suggesting is, even though the majority of our politicians claim to identify as Christians, it's almost shameful for them to admit that that influences their worldview and how they address policy. And I think that that is a huge negative sort of leading to where we get today, to why we're becoming more and more secular and more materialistic. Because so many people are just like, sure, I'm Christian, but that's irrelevant. But it's like, no, that's not irrelevant, right? As soon as you say that that's irrelevant and that doesn't really, I could argue outside of a religious framework. I could do that in a secular framework. Like I was saying earlier, you want to be able to make your argument so that it still is the best argument for other people's value system. But I'm tired of like having people that represent my worldview having to like be shamed about it when it comes to, how we influence culture and how we influence politics. For me, it's less about negative reinforcement and more about positive reinforcement. So I don't need, for example, I don't need to make degeneracy illegal per se. I just need to basically push propaganda efforts to make the opposite of degeneracy good, right? And so look at how effective the secularists have been at pushing sort of like trans identity. Look at it's not that they had to compel you to be trans by law, though they do some things with law that they're trying to compel people to accept it. But the bigger part of it is the cultural acceptance because of the propaganda push that they've had. Why can't we get back to our government and our institutions pushing sort of a propaganda that is a good propaganda? That's a loaded term in itself, propaganda. I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean, why can't we push the truth? That gender roles are defined and are the truth for most people, and that it's good, and that motherhood is the greatest thing that humans can accomplish, and that we should venerate that and celebrate that, and we should celebrate the core family unit, and we should actually start shaming people that are out there having premarital sex and thinking that high body counts is something that's cool, and we should encourage young men and young women that the correct thing to do that would be best for the majority of people is to settle down and have families. And it's not about who's got the nicest car. It's okay. It's okay to work real hard and get nice stuff. There's no shame in that. But the priority has to be your religion, your moral framework, and your family. And as a government, I want people in our government that are pushing that. And I think that coming at it from a Christian framework is the way to do it.
Well, and it's also a remarkable, and by the way, amen for all that, brother. It's a remarkable blue collar position, really, right? It doesn't speak to the elites because I understand why a lot of elites want to reject it. Now, I find it funny when people will quote Dawkins for something that he said 20 years ago, and now even Dawkins is calling himself a cultural Christian, whatever the hell that means. Because he's realizing he's like, oh, damn, we've let the muzzies in, and now that's becoming a bit of a problem, isn't it? I don't want to walk the streets and get knifed. So there, even that step away, right? Someone who's a hardcore, anti-theist. Dawkins once said that teaching kids religion in schools is akin to child abuse. So to go from that position to like, well, I do like the churches and the songs, and maybe we should resubstantiate that, is a massive, massive step. I think this is kind of why you're seeing this massive inflow into the church. I know on a personal story, there was the George Floyd protest that broke my brain. Right, I was, my daughter had just been born. I was living in Montreal. I looked out my window. There's a big field there, and people were doing a kneel-in for George Floyd. And I was a diehard liberal, right? Like, I was a Canadian liberal. I suffered from a '90s mindset for an embarrassing long time, and that was the one where the contradictions went pink. Because I looked at it and said, "Well, that's a religious ceremony.
Yep,
what is going on?" And my, secular humanist, atheist brain just went into overdrive, and I was like, I can't deal with that. Like, that shouldn't be happening. And and you talk to people there, and they look at you like you're the asshole. Like, wait, whoa. We're all atheists here. Why aren't you upset about this? And that was the instant where I'm like, I gotta go to church. Like, I'm wrong. And I'm not just wrong about a mathematical formula or got some facts wrong. It's like, I'm wrong about reality, and I need to reformat my entire worldview, which that's why I'm always very sympathetic to people who are pushed into this position. It's like, it's not fun. It's not a fun ride to go, oh shit, I was wrong about reality, and I need to start.
I'm the same boat. I absolutely was wrong too. It's not fun. You know, one of the first discussions I remember having with Andrew was, he was just like, I mean, this is maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And he was like, wait until you see how bad this trans stuff gets. And he's like, I'll tell you where it's going. He's like, you know, it's going to get to the point where if you could choose everything, if everything's subjective, then so is age. And if age is subjective, then that means sexual attraction based on age is also subjective. He's like, that's where it's going to go. Now, that seemed unthinkable to me 5 years ago. What are you talking about? Sure, there'll be those fringe, but that is where we're heading. And like a lot of the stuff, I mean, it's amazing how fast things have moved along. And so I've no shame in admitting, like, yeah, I was wrong. I sort of approached it through this libertarian-esque live and let live. Look, I could raise, even when I became Christian, I was like, well, I could raise my family and have my priorities how I want, but I don't want that. I don't want that influencing our national politics, our cultural institutions. And that's a huge mistake, because the truth is, like, when you get right down to, like, again, I'm not philosophically minded. So just as a redneck, I'll put this in my own words. I'm not talking from like expertise in having read a book or anything that suggests this. But what is religion really? Like, what is it? Like, you're searching for meaning in life, right? And at some point, you acknowledge that you don't have the answers as an individual. And so you're seeking it from an outside perspective. And a lot of it will be a reliance on faith, that you're going to rely on something that you can't tangibly prove right in front of you, but to your core believe you believe it. And that's secular humanism. It's not religion. I understand if someone was here, an atheist was here, they'd be like, oh, a lack of religion isn't religion. I get that, but the way in which they operate, the majority of them, at least the ones that have cultural influence, is very much religious minded. Let me give you an example in a recent debate. Again, going back to the Andrew Wilson, Richard Carrier debate. Richard Carrier, you're a secular humanist. When asked about birth rates, what do you do? Right? The secular humanist birth rates, they're terrible. They're like less than 1, if I remember, but certainly nowhere near replacement. So what are you going to do? Right? As a country, but more importantly, as an ideology. How do you promulgate this ideology when, like, for example, Islam is way out, having children at much higher rates, their birth rates much higher, and very few of them, in fact, not only are very few of them leaving the religion, it's apostasy to do so. They have an answer for that too in Islam, right? And so and he just says, yeah, according to, it'll really become a crisis around 2080. I guess we'll think of something then. Now, if that's not faith, I don't know what is, right? His faith isn't, I will die in my soul. If I was a Christian, I'll go to the kingdom of heaven. That's not his faith. His faith is, trust me, people that think like me will come up with a solution inevitably. And meanwhile, we're continuing to walk off the cliff. But he thinks that somewhere, someone will come up with a solution that thinks just like him. And it's like, the irony is, like, that's more of an absurdist sort of faith-based conclusion than the evidence we have for the existence of Christ. And, what we can see in the relationships that people have had with him, and like how that's bettered their life. So, yeah, and absolutely, the cult-like behavior that you see from the most radical portions of the left, George Floyd's a great example, COVID another, right? The just without any real basis whatsoever, just total dogmatic belief in a system, and fuck you if you disagreed. Facts be damned. Who are you to challenge? What do you mean? You think you're a scientist? You're not a scientist. Shut up and trust the science. You don't know what you're talking about. And you could be like, but I could see that this is garbage. I could see it with my own eyes. And it was simple things. Like, they would tell you, like, well, if you go out to a Trump rally, you could catch and spread the disease. And that's why a lot of states had even open air lockdowns. Even in my state of Pennsylvania, you couldn't have a gathering more than 250 people in certain counties. If they were red or yellow, they had this stupid system, right? And yet, all of the contact tracers said, oh, except Black Lives Matter. If you're at a Black Lives Matter rally, magically, this is the smartest disease in the world. It somehow knows not to spread. And they kept saying this. They kept saying over and over, oh, actually, the contact tracers showed that there was no spread of the virus at Black Lives Matter. And it's like, well, these two things can't be true. If that's the case, then let us go back to the public parks and let us go back to the beaches. Let us go back outdoors. And they're like, no, you can't do that. It'll spread. Then, of course, what you found out was, well, they were instructed, the contact tracers were instructed to not allow people to discuss whether or not they were at a George Floyd protest. And so, of course, if you're not allowed to ask the question, then the answer to the question that you weren't allowed to ask comes out as, oh, no one was there. But nonetheless, that was sort of a dogmatic act of faith. Oh, we just trust implicitly. Same with George Floyd. Same with the litany of other issues. And you could pick. You could take Ukraine, Russia, for example. There were people that just had a dogmatic belief that this is it. I know my side will win. Come hell or high water. Doesn't matter. That's the way it is because that's what the experts have told us. And who are you? You're not an expert. And I see this all the time in debating with the left. Even the most recent one. And, God help us, there was just an attack today on National Guardsmen. It appears the two of them died. It looks like this was an act of Islamic terrorism, though it's too early to say. But I've done debate after debate with the left about left-wing violence. All the studies, don't you know, show that actually it's the right overwhelmingly in the past decade that's committed more violence. And you'll ask simple things like, well, does this study, how many instances of violence did it say occurred during the George Floyd protests for left-wingers? Well, like 2. Really, just 2. I personally watched night after night the news, hundreds of examples of riots that occurred during George Floyd. And now they've written the history to say, no, it was like 2. And we just have to accept that. And when you push back, like the left just looks at you like, oh, you don't trust the science? You don't trust the data? And that, how is that not an act of dogmatic faith? Right? It's just, they don't know what the data is. They don't know how it was collected. They don't know anything. They're just like, I trust it. I implicitly trust it. And anyone criticizing it, even if all of us saw it with our eyes, or, the last thing I'll say on this is, look at the issue of like biological men in female sports. Like, I can't tell you how many times I debated this and people with a straight face would be like, show me the studies. Show me the studies that say that men are on mass biologically stronger than women. And what do you say to this? You're like, this is purely an act of faith, purely an act of dogma. So the truth is, if there's a vacuum, something's going to fill it. And what's filled it is secular degeneracy around the world. That's what's filled the gap. We thought, we have rationed ourselves out of the need for religion. We as individuals are capable of divining morality on a case-by-case basis, and we'll be homogenous. We'll all agree. We'll all say, yes, that is the moral thing to do. And it couldn't be further from the truth. And what's happened is, it turns out that if you allow people to make up their own mind, individuals can get to what I would consider an acceptable moral framework, not through Christianity. It's certainly possible. That could be a different religion or it could be a lack of religion. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I don't think societies can. I think that what we're finding out is if you do this as a societal-wide thing, there's so many people that will say, what's best for me is always what's moral. And so therefore the morality, stealing could be bad one day and then it could be good the next. Why? Because it benefited me one day and it didn't the other time. And that's what we've done. As a world, we have gotten away from sort of a moral grounded framework and what I think is best in Christianity, and we've replaced it with something completely different, but it's been replaced. And the idea that it's like, no, it's just pure logic and reason that's replaced it is absurd. I mean, we're running around canceling people for not using the correct pronouns. That's where pure logic and reason have gotten us.
I know you said you don't read, Rob, but maybe you can pick up the audiobook. There's a really good book by this guy called Tom Holland. He's a historian, Roman Catholic. He wrote a great book called Dominion, and essentially working through how Christianity was fundamental to Western civilization. We can say even Eastern civilization from Byzantium on up. One of the things he touches on, this is, you probably have heard this argument, but it's a good one to use against these secularists, is that this idea of innocent before proven guilty, that's a Christian virtue. Mm-hmm. That doesn't exist before Christianity. This idea of even having value, a person having value separate from what they do, didn't exist before Christ. Because all of a sudden, not always because of the sacrifice on the cross, but he grants us personhood. This is many people don't understand the Trinity, and we won't have to get into a whole Trinity debate and stuff like that, but the Trinity grants us personhood. Without it, we don't have it. Like it doesn't exist. We would just be our thing. So it'll be like you are a soldier and you are valuable as a soldier, or maybe we can extend it to a citizen and you're valuable as a citizen. But outside of that, we don't care about you. Like Bob doesn't have a personhood. Bob is just a Roman citizen or American citizen. That gives him his entire value, and outside of that, it doesn't matter. So if you get wasted, oh well, right? It's too bad, so sad. I'm sure your family will mourn you, but collectively we don't care, right? So Christ changes all of that, and suddenly we have value outside of our profession or whatever is given to us. We have intrinsic human value, and that gets us into British common law and all the other wonderful things that now you can argue for. You can't argue without Christ. And I know the secular humanists, and I know Gad Sad will talk about this stuff that say, well, no, it's evolutionary. I'm like, well, if it's evolutionary, then tell me why we only had that evolutionary tick 2,000 years ago. And even if we want to play this game, it's evolutionary, great. So we evolved to become Christians so that we could have this moral evolutionary change, and that only seems to hold itself together with Christians. You take the Christian ethic out, it goes away. We've seen this happen in the Soviet freaking Union.
Yeah.
This isn't like some hypothetical, like, oh, you're crazy, Mironchuk, you're coming up with stories. It's like, no, I'm not. We ran this experiment for 75 freaking years over in Russia, and it was horrible. So why are we doing this again? Oh, because you have my preferences, and you want to be in charge, and you want to exalt the self, and it's all about you and pride. And you'll kick it up to everything else and say wonderful things about the children and this and that and all ethics and the Bill of Rights and all this other magical paper crap and magical brown people and all this stuff to make you feel better. But at the end of the day, for the secular humanists, it's all about you.
That's right. It's subjective. It's right. They can't get around it, right? The classic atheist versus Christian debate goes as follows. The offense that the atheist has is, but how do you know your version of Christianity is right? And inevitably, the Christian's going to, you can have all the claims you want, right? But as a Christian, you are going to rely on an act of faith at some point, right? You're going to say, I believe this. I believe this in my heart that this is true, right? Of course, we could go back and we could say there's historical evidence for Christ, and, Orthodox are able, I think, better than any church. And now I'm open to hearing, so don't get mad at me. Don't bite my head off. And I have talked to more Orthodox about this, but they could trace the lineage back, right, to their church fathers. They keep meticulous records, and they're willing to show you here we could show you the direct lineage going back centuries to where we get to where we're at today. We have the documents. We could show you. We're open about it, right? But still, at the end of the day, you have to believe in sort of like divine miracles, and it's going to be so. The argument from the atheist is, but you're just one religion of thousands upon thousands. So how do you know that you've picked correctly? But the problem is, right, the atheist or the secular humanist, however they want to term themselves, they're never going to be able to accept that there's no objective place for morality that they come from. At the end of the day, it's always going to be subjective. Now, your argument may be, if you're a secular humanist or an atheist, yes, but your application of the morality of your religion is subjective. And that's true, right? That I, for example, could say, well, I could bend the rules and how I interpret Christianity to justify what I'm doing this day. Arguably true. And yet still, though, there's at least something stable to point to. There is an objective truth. It exists outside. This is, if you're fans of The Crucible, you saw when Andrew was debating Naomi or whatever the other day and whatever. This is what he was getting to when he was saying objectivity must exist outside of human minds. In other words, like Christ is the Son of God and God exists without humans existing. That's still a true fact. He exists, right? Even if humans cease to exist tomorrow, God still exists. And his declarations are still the truth, even without humans. Once humans are necessary to the equation, it then becomes subjective, right? And the problem is through their sense of morality, it's always going to be subjective. And so, there are things that I'm willing to accept, right? Like murder. Yeah, okay. Almost everyone would say murder bad. But how do you define what murder is? Right? Now it starts to get iffy, right? And then more importantly, what do you do about the things that aren't so black and white? And, I don't understand, like, when I used to be atheist, I would bite that bullet. I'd say, you're right, I am subjective. Yep. I still think that my subjective understanding of morality is still something that could function in society, and I basically just want to be left alone, and I'm not going out there and harming people, and largely my subjective morality fits in with Christianity. Almost entirely, in fact, even when I wasn't a Christian, which is probably what made me realize Christianity was the truth so much, because deep down I knew the truth. And I was trying to act as if, the outward morality was from things that came from Christianity, much like you're saying here, right? With the idea of sort of innocent and proven until proven guilty. Like, yeah, these concepts are Christian, but let's assume they're not for a second. Let's assume that it's all wrong. Let's assume that we're wrong and that, all our religion's wrong. Then the question I have, if we're going to reject sort of Christian nationalism, is what makes Americans American? Like, and you hear this question a lot in the United Kingdom. I used to watch these shows all the time. What does it mean to be British? And these they have no answer. It's like, being in Britain? That's it? That's what it means? You see, because, right. So, like, Australia would fit into this category as well. There are certain countries that we just have, it's an ethnic group that live there. Japan for the Japanese, right? Spain for the Spanish. It used to be Britain for the British, right? France for the French. But the United States is different, right? Because it was a nation that was formed by a bunch of... Now, it's not as disparate as they'll have you believe, right? I don't think the Founding Fathers were welcoming in the Barbary pirates, right? So the idea that they would be happy, like, seeing how much Islam has a foothold in certain parts of this country is laughable. They would be appalled. Nonetheless, forget about that, right? The same's true of Australia, right? And some other countries, right? So what brings us together cohesively? You have to have someone, you all have to be pushing for something. Something has to unite you to be fellow citizens, right? And so what is it at this point in the United States? What is that unites us? And formerly, I would have said this 50 years ago. I would have said, like, a belief in our foundational documents and, like, the greatness of our founding fathers. That's what unites us, that we're all pushing. For example, we all believe in the importance of free speech. We all believe in the importance of the right to defend yourself, right? Those concepts, the individual, right? That the United States was this great sort of project that understood that based on your individual talents, you could come here and you could make something of yourself, right? If given that opportunity, and the government sort of stands back. Is anyone with a straight face going to say that that's something that unites all of us today in the United States? Not a chance. In fact, most lefties would be antithetical to many of these things. They absolutely were for censoring people on social media, for example, when it came to things they disagreed with about George Floyd or about the election or about COVID. And need we even talk about the Second Amendment, right? And what many of the lefties think about that. So what is it? It's not an ethnicity. We have disparate ethnicities. It's not culture. We have vastly different cultures, right? It's geographic. Even if you could do geography, my goodness, the United States is so big. Like, there are certain areas here in the United States, if you told, like, people from the future or in the past, this is the same country, in, like, New Mexico versus, like, the hills of the Rocky Mountains versus the beach of Florida, you'd be like, how can this be? How could this be the same, like, sort of country? So what is it? And one of the reasons that I support Christian nationalism is cohesiveness, because it's something for us to come together and say, even if not everyone, there could be outliers. There could be people that aren't Christians. That's fine. I'm not saying that they should be jailed. But if we as a culture push for these values and the majority of us start to embrace those values, that's something at least. Even if it's wrong, even if Christianity is wrong, it is moral. Even in most secular worldviews, what Christians, like the Ten Commandments and all that, it's, basically, now screw some of them that would argue against some of them, but you get what I'm saying. We need something cohesive. And I don't know what the answer is. It is obvious to me that this country is going to fracture. And it's obvious that Australia is going to fracture. And it's obvious that the United Kingdom is going to fracture. All of these sort of first world countries, they're going to fracture because we've accepted this suicidal empathy of bringing in vastly different cultures. And now we're at loggerheads. What do? There's nothing cohesive that brings us together anymore. That's another reason that I think it's important to embrace a Christian nationalist framework.
Well, it's interesting, right? So Russian Orthodoxy is being in the news these days because of Representative Joe Wilson saying that there's Russian spies all through Russian Orthodox churches and ROCOR and all these other churches that I belong to as well. So that's always concerning because we saw the exact same narrative being used in Ukraine until they started to outlaw
they banned it,
canonical church. And abusing priests and breaking into churches and destroying those churches, and in many cases killing and abusing priests. So it's a forerunner, right? And I called this about a year ago. That's like what's happening. It's an old term. There's an old saying that what's happening in Russia today in Russia, tomorrow in America.
Yeah.
But there's a positive part of that as well, because Putin, despite all his, Putin's right, the greater evil, he substantiated Russia as an Orthodox country a few years back, and by doing that, in Russia proper, in the Federation, you still have Muslims and you still have Jews,
Sure.
and you still have other groups, but what he means by that in terms of how Russia, let's say, conducts itself, its general laws, its phronema, right, going forward as a nation is an Orthodox phronema, and saying that look, we're going to do certain things, and you're if you want to be part of this federation, you're just going to get on board with this, and if there's tension between your religion and the state, well, just guess what, we're the state, and we'll do the state thing to you if you disagree, right? You're here as a guest, and you can stay as a guest and be mindful as a guest and be a nice, polite little guest. But as soon as you start becoming a problem, we'll get rid of you.
Right.
And they've shown that with the Chechens and stuff like that as well. It's like, we can get rid of you. So there's a term I've been using called civilizational capital, and it's kind of using three subgroups, right? You have the social capital, political capital, and economic capital. But that's how I see those domains as held together, which are fundamental for civilization. And the capital is not always just meaning money. It can be I know you've used this in political capital, like this idea, like it's a metaphysical claim in and of itself. I think what holds civilizations together, I call it a regio, that which binds. And what you need is a ruler, a region, and a religion. You need a clear ruler, and you're not confused about who's running the show, right? It's like, here's a ruler, here's his group, and here's what's going on. And that doesn't have to be a necessary dictator, but it does mean that this idea of democracy has to be addressed, because you can't keep having this uni party that's run by bureaucrats, and that every single human being in your country thinks they have autonomous rights because they can cast a vote every 4 years. It's a dumb system. You need a region, which means you actually have to have borders and people and a culture that's contained within that region that speaks to that region. So when we talk about Russia or America, we know exactly what that is, and we're not confused. And you need a religion, because religion is not just morality, it's not just God and someone above all things that we all answer to. It is all those things, but it's a living tradition, so that it informs people about your past, your present, and your future. You're connected to something. You're in the stream of your culture, of your civilization. So your civilization means something. And by meaning something, all of a sudden that human capital you build up, you get a little you get competent in something, and you build up and you invest that human capital. I use the example of like a little fishing village out, on the Adriatic somewhere. They get really good at fishing. They keep investing those fishing skills, and over time they become the Portuguese, right, or the Greeks or whoever. Mm-hmm. That's how you build it, but you need those things to bind those people together, or else it doesn't go anywhere. You can't build a multi-generational cathedral if people don't believe in it, and that they believe that this thing will get built. We won't be around to see it,
right?
But Notre Dame's going to get built, and so that this work isn't just to get money today. It's building something beautiful and something that's going to inform that civilization going forward. That's what we destroyed in the West. That's what liberalism has destroyed. That regio. We no longer have clear rulership. They're attacking the idea of what a region is, what a people or group is, and our borders and all the rest of it. And of course, religion, right? They've either destroyed it or they're trying to denigrate it to such a degree where it's no longer a functioning form. Like, you can be a Christian, just don't vote Christian. Don't vote for any kind of Christian values. Don't promote your values in the world, because that would be separation of church and state and magical document. And you don't want to be a bigot or a nasty theologist or something like that, right? A theist. Just go along with the sludge. Just be fine. Buy some more, watch some more porn, buy some more,
right.
Buy some more hamburgers, and just get along with it. It's fine, right?
Well, there's a lot that you said there's first, this notion of democracy. I find it interesting when you talk about Christian nationalism. The default assumption is going to be separation of church and state. That's what the founding fathers entailed. I don't think a lot of people realize exactly. And again, I'm not claiming to be such a great student of history or anything like that, but this just basically said you can't set up a national religion. Now, at the time of the founding or of the signing of the Constitution, there were states that had state religions, and they said you had to be part of that state religion to be able to hold office or even to be able to vote in some instances. And the founding fathers were not like, no, you can't do that. They just said nationally that you could do this. Now, it makes sense back then because most of them were either Christians or deists, and most of the people that were coming into this country were those. And even those that wouldn't have been, they were so outnumbered and were basically would be hard to identify which of them weren't because everybody was sort of pushing for the same sort of values and systems. And this is when you hear like sort of people will say, well, look at the secular countries and how well they're doing. Ask them which ones, right? And they're going to be like Scandinavia. You mean homogenous societies. By the way, as they continue to mass import people from around the world, all of a sudden you'll start to see that those secular societies are doing worse and worse and worse. Because it turns out what's effective there is the homogeneousness of the society and the fact that it largely, back from when many of them used to have official state religions, right? And what happened was good times create weak men. Well, you didn't really need that religion much because all of you are just sort of culturally pushing for the same things. So the idea that you needed this religion to be cohesive, well, not so much in that case, because you had a population of people that were all like, oh yeah, we're all sort of, so hypothetically in that situation, you could build the big, obviously, if we're not talking religious, the building that takes 120 years. You can theoretically do it in that system because everyone's buying in. My neighbor's my brother, basically. We have the same goals we can push for. Now, religion makes that easier because there's a spiritual component to it, right? And you're able to see that value of it. But what's happening is as people are being brought in that don't buy into those cultural values, it's not going to be possible. And what you're going to see in the next 50 years is these Scandinavian countries are going to get precipitously worse. And all of a sudden, there's going to be a move back towards religion from a lot of this population that's been like, well, we find ourselves to be very secular. The notion, I used to sort of like chuckle at this when you would have these like people that semantically, 2 years ago, this would be a common theme of my channel. I'd be like, the United States sort of like, our democracy, and people be like, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. And I'd be like, oh, go fuck yourself. You know what I'm saying? But actually, it very much matters, right? Like the founding fathers, if you're wondering, if you're like, I don't get that, I know that that's technically true, but why is this important? Let me sum it up in a layman way for easy to understand. The founding fathers didn't give a shit about democracy. In fact, they didn't like it, right? They were coming at it from two different angles. They hated sort of the king and like mass authority, like in the form of a monarchy. They didn't like that, right?
For autocratic rule,
right? But then they tried the Articles of Confederation, which was like the opposite direction of that, almost like similar to like libertarian-esque, and they realized that failed too. So they were sort of looking for something in between, and basically what they came up with was that there would be a representative, a constitutional republic, right? But even then, you could say, fine, a democratic republic. No, not really, right? They thought that only a select few people should even have a voice. That was white, adult landowners, right? And some states made it even more specific than that you had to be of a specific religion or a different age. And even then, like I was looking into this, I was shocked. Like those first elections under the Constitution, let's say that hypothetically only 20% of the population in a particular area was eligible to vote. You still saw turnouts that was like only 10% of those eligible. It wasn't really this system. We like to think back like, oh, we've become like lethargic here in modern times where so few people, less than 60% or less than 70% of people are participating in voting. Dude, it wasn't like that back in the day. It wasn't like everyone was like, gotta get out and vote today. It was like people that had a stake. Being in Congress was like service. You were already wealthy, probably. If you were elected to Congress, you probably owned land and a farm and you were managing it, and you sacrificed. You left your family, you left your homestead to go out because you believed in this project of the United States. So yeah, this notion of like, well, democracy shit. That's the truth. And it's a tough pill to swallow. It really is. Because I don't want to believe that the way you were born or your station in life dictates whether or not you could have a voice. But the truth of the matter is, as we've allowed more and more people to have a voice and encourage, an awful lot of people don't have a stake in sort of the direction the country goes, or that their value system is so vastly different from yours. And this gets me to the other point. I'm actually interested to hear what you think about this. I was talking to Jake Rattlesnake and his debate there with Planet Peterson. One of the things he wanted to differentiate from sort of a Christian worldview compared to a secular worldview is the idea of time frame preference, right? Mm-hmm. A Christian has a long term. You have duties, right? You are a father. You are a husband. You are trying to leave the world in a better place for your children, right? This is why materialism doesn't really jive with Christianity, because there are other things you put ahead of your material wealth. Don't get it twisted. This doesn't mean that you can't obtain material wealth as a Christian, but it should not be your top priority, right? It should be like sort of honoring Christ. It should be being a good family man, a good husband, a good father, right? Those things, or if you're a woman, a mother, you get the point, right? The secular humanists, it's all me, 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 right? What feels good now? Free love, have sex with whoever you want, abortions. It's all about me, the immediate time frame. What is good for me now? It's not thinking, well, what's good for our civilization 100 years after I'm gone? Because when you look at it just now, again, it's really hard, even if you provide financial incentives for people to have children, it's hard to tell someone if they're concerned about their material wealth, why they should ever have children. And that's why you see the more secular countries become, the lower the birth rate goes. Because the concern is about my rights today, my benefits today. It's not about your duty as a citizen of this country, of this world, to ensure that things get good in the future. You're thinking, what benefits me right now? And so when you look at it through that framework, absolutely, it makes sense why you would say, why can't I just go sleep with a bunch of women? Feels good. Why not? What do you mean a duty to future generations? None of that matters. So I'm interested to see what you think about this sort of notion of like...
Well, Rob, lucky for you, I have a whole playlist I can give to you. My friend Matthew Erickson and I discussed this started last year. So I'll put it this way. There was at some point, I think in 2024, there was a video going around of this woman crossing basically it wasn't even a bridge, like some sticks across a river in the Congo, right? And she's crossing it over, the river's raging. She falls in and her thing comes off her head and floats down the river. Oh my goodness, right? And the caption was, the West has failed Congo, or something to that effect. And I started thinking about it. I'm like, actually, I don't think so. I don't think the West has failed Congo. I think that that let's say the Congolese, or there are people who live inside of what I call the primal frame, right? So I do a lot of framework because I think it's just useful. But you have the primal frame and you have the civil frame, or civilizational frame. And then the primal frame, it works in certain environments. In fact, it's the frame that you need if you're living in Congo. I don't know what it's like to live in Congo. Like, I'm sure if you threw me in the middle of a jungle, suddenly I'm living. If I'm either probably dead, eaten by a tiger, or I start living a lot like the Congolese, who've been living there for thousands of years, right? So, okay, obviously something's working out for them. So here's the big difference. The civil frame person looks at that situation and goes, well, what we're going to do is we're going to build you a nice big, go in there with UNESCO and build you a nice big, beautiful brick bridge. Right? Because in the civil frame mind, he's like, well, that's what you do. You build a big, beautiful bridge. It's a cultural thing. You save it. You maintain it. It's important to your culture. It becomes the bridge. You know, it's a big thing, right? You get married on it, all that wonderful things, right? In the primal, but so you do that, and you come back the next year and go, where's the bridge? And they go, well, it only rains like for 3 or 4 months out of the year. So when it wasn't raining, we just took all the bricks down and built this oven, or did other things with it, or sold the bricks because we needed the money, and that's what you do, right? It's that recycling mentality. That's zero time preference, right? That's everything's here, everything's immediate, and everything's existential. Because in a primal frame, there's lions and tigers and freaking bears, right? And you gotta move, right? So that makes sense in that frame. In a civil frame, we don't do that. We build civilization, and civilization is supposed to actually be the buffer zone from the wilds. We conquer nature by building civilization, and that gets us into civilization of capital. Civilization actually isn't rational. It's supra-rational. There's no good reason in the world to make a bank beautiful other than a beautiful bank makes you feel good when you look at it, makes you feel part of something. It reflects you. The civilization reflects you, and the civilian or the citizen begins to reflect that civilization. We maintain things. We pick up trash. We do all these other things that technically you don't have to do to have a city or a functioning system, but yet we do it. Why? Because it's civilization, because we're builders. It's what we do. Why? Because we're builders. It's what we do. Like, that's our frame. Mm-hmm. Now, you take primal frame people, and by the way, this isn't even ethnic. You can, I think, certain ideologies, let's say the progressive left has become primal frame. Zero time preference. Everything's immediate. Everything's usable. Get what you can now, right? Mm-hmm. Don't think about long-term effects. Don't consider it. Don't maintain anything. Don't do any maintenance. In fact, you don't even know how to do maintenance. One of the things, Rob, that keeps me up at night a little bit, if I choose to think about it, is that when I started talking about this, a lot of people wrote into me and said things like, look, they know somebody working, let's say, in oil rigs, and the boomers and all the older guys are all retiring, and the safety protocol is basically in a binder, and the people who are taking over these safety protocols are getting a binder and maybe a week's worth of training and go, good luck.
Right.
And this is like massive energy infrastructure. It's actually kind of part of my narrative of why they closed down all those nuclear plants out of Europe is because they realized something like, we don't know how to, these things are bombs now. And we don't have the people to actually maintain this stuff anymore. We've lost that knowledge, like the Romans with the aqueducts. And all of a sudden it's like, oops, oh, shoot, this is dangerous. So you take that primal frame, you bring it into civilization. Now, one of two things are going to happen. Either the civilizational frame people are going to domesticize, they're going to, let's say, conquer and put that civilizational frame into the primal frame people, and they're going to come over and become civilizational people, or the primal people are going to win out and your civilization collapses, which brings me to my statement, which is you no longer live in a civilization anymore. You think you do, it looks like you do, but you don't. If anyone wants to go back to this, the talk I had with Dark Enlightenment, and I want to get him on the show again, hopefully soon. But we did a show called Your City is Bankrupt, and he did an amazing breakdown of how your city, Chicago, or any other city in America, is absolutely and totally bankrupt.
Yep.
The reason why you're getting all this mass migration, right? There's many levels we can look at this, right? But one of the main reasons is that every single immigrant who comes in has a price tag on them, and they're cashing in. So the reason why you get the 600 million Chinese students, this is like the big, oh, Trump's doing this thing. It's like, no, they're funding your universities. You get rid of them, half your universities go away.
Which is good
and
for me.
Cities,
I say let the universities go, but yes, you're right.
Right. So when you start to onboard that idea is that your city's bankrupt, your civilization is no longer, it just looks like it is because you have the things and all the accoutrements of what people think of as civilization. Buildings are still standing, hopefully. You got cars and all this technology, but that's all you got. Like there's no capital being built, literally. So if your cities are bankrupt and your towns are bankrupt and your country is essentially bankrupt, this is not just America, it's all across the West, then what do? Well, you start injecting this primal frame into it, and then all of a sudden the primals win out, and everything else turns into favelas, Bangladesh. Pick your shithole, right?
Yeah,
and that's what's happening.
I don't disagree.
So in order to reverse it, is to simply go, okay, stop everything, right, and start to collectivize within groups, right? And our groups we're builders. We need to find likewise builders, and we start rebuilding civilization on the ground up. Right now, you can go out and buy towns. You can buy a town now. Like there's tons, you're in the steel belt. There's tons of small towns that have been completely derelict, but they have the infrastructure, and you can, I've checked it out. You can, like here in Australia, you be out in whoop, like freaking nowhere, but you can buy a town for like, I don't know, $100,000. Like it's embarrassingly cheap. Because you think, well, a town that's going to be multi-millions of dollars. No. There's no one there, and no one wants to move there. But they have roads and they have pipelines and all that other stuff. Buy a town, and then now your base is there, right? It's like I said, fishing village to Portuguese. So this is going to be a generational project, but it can be done, and we can start it now. And this is, I know. Jake mentioned this when I think it was a debate with Peterson, is that he sees this as a generational thing.
Sure.
It's like we start this seed now, and all we have to do is make sure we also have the infrastructure to protect it and to grow and, pass that down to our kids. Like, no. You need to defend this. And probably in 400 years, our descendants are right back to where we're at, because this seems to be the natural rhythm
cycle,
of things.
right?
But hey, that's 400. If I can give my generations 400 years of something to do that's good and prosperous and upholds the good, the beautiful, the true, why not? Considering the alternative, which is gay race Marxism. What? No, not doing it.
Yeah. Well, you talk about Chicago. I remember reading a Matt Taibbi book years ago, and this was during the 2008 financial crisis, and he was doing a lot of work on like Goldman Sachs and things like that, and how corrupt that whole situation is. Now, one of the things he said that was like peripherally connected to that was he was talking to a lot of people that were connected to investment groups and was sort of trying to get a general feel on a lot of things that were happening economically across the world, but in particular the United States. So he has this chapter in his one book. I can't remember the name of the book, but he's basically like, I get this call from like this friend, right? That's like in Dubai. He's representing like an investment group out of Dubai, I think it was. And he's like, you're going to need to take this call. Like it's crazy call. And so he gets put through this call. And there was a group in the United States that was pitching to these investors something. And what it was, this stuck with me because I live in Pennsylvania. They were trying to sell them the Pennsylvania Turnpike, which is the first like tolled road in like the history of the United States, like the first turnpike in the history of the United States. Now, why? Why would they be selling the turnpike? Because they're not builders. They're not concerned. This is exactly it. It's, well, shit. The current administration looks very bad economically. So what could you do right now? How could you kick the can down the road? Well, you sell critical infrastructure. Now, it ultimately fell through here on the turnpike, but in Chicago, it didn't. So in Chicago, they sold the rights to some like Arab investment firm to their parking meters. Now, this was an estimated like $50 billion worth of revenue or something like that. And they sold it for something like insulting, like $50 million, like 50 years worth of revenue from these parking meters. Now, for that current administration right then, what's their incentive? Well, they just want to look good now. That's someone's problem in the future. But right now, look how popular. Look, a boon, a $50 million surplus. That's great. Look how great I did. And no one at the moment is thinking like, yeah, but what about our children? Like, this is a huge lost opportunity. And this is what I like. I'm open to hearing suggestions, if not through Christianity. What's the idea? How do you sell to people right now that want to say it's something that's fundamentally true? I would never suggest that we force people to have children. Like the whole handmaiden tale stuff, that's bullshit. I would never suggest that, right? But how do you convince someone once you say, look, it's your choice, and you think that you value materialism? Yes, I value my freedom. I value going on vacation. I value buying nice things. I value my investment properties and this, that, and the other. Okay, we should have kids. Why? Well, because generationally, we're going to need that as a civilization to sort of, make sure that we can continue to be good stewards of what we built and what our forefathers built. And it's going to require having at least replacement and probably above replacement to continue to manage that infrastructure, right? We have to do that. And people might be like, yeah, I see what you mean, but not me. I want to keep just having sex and having abortions and this, that, and the other. I don't really care about that. How's that benefit me right now? Right? And are you suggesting I should be forced to do that? Well, no. I'm suggesting you should want to do that. That's what I'm suggesting. And I think that a Christian framework is the best way to become those builders, right? Because what it does is it humbles you, right? You understand the very nature of Christianity, right? Is understanding that you aren't the center of the world. It's not just about you. You were asked things. Look, the truth is a lot of sin feels good in the moment. That's why people do it. I had a friend once that tragically it was I don't know what YouTube's terms of service is, so I'll be careful. It was a particular narcotic that you inject, a very serious one, one that's very addictive. And my friend told me he was going to try it, and I was like, no, don't do it. It's a big mistake. And he did it, and then he was like, oh, you have no idea how good it felt. And I was like, well, of course it does. People aren't addicted to it because it initially feels like shit, but it ruins you. In the moment, it felt good, but you could predictably see that the consequences of this in the future are going to be very negative for you. And again, that's that primal, like right in front of your face, immediate time frame preference. And so I don't know how you convince these people. Now, here's the thing, though. Here's the good news for those of you that are like, look, I would consider this, right? I consider saying, okay, Rob, I see your point that like as a civilization, we're going to be in a lot of trouble if we're relying on bringing people into our country to continue this civilizational progress that don't believe in it. They don't share these. I understand what you're saying, Rob, but maybe not for me. Here's the deal, though. No one's suggesting that you have no short-term time preference. All we're suggesting is merely that you have to accept that part of what you're doing has to be for that long-term preference. And so we're not saying that you should, because there's a problem going the opposite way. Maybe you know someone like this. I personally know a handful of people that saved and saved and saved and saved their whole life and basically lived as like paupers, and then they pass away, and it's like, Well, they didn't have kids, maybe. And it's like, what did you save for? That money just goes to like a distant relative or to the government. Like, it's okay to treat yourself a little. No one's suggesting that. No one's suggesting. And there's this, I believe this. I believed that when I was an atheist, that Christians were all just these suit and tie, stuck up, never having fun, just like, oh, we have to be prim and proper all the time, and it's just about constantly making sure that we never even issue a curse word or that's a sin. That's not what Christianity's about. That's not it. And that's not what Christian nationalism would be about. It's not to suggest that like we all have to sit around and this is a fundamental mistake you see when people like will criticize a lot of the Christian nationalists. I'll say, oh, but you sin. Look at how they swore there. Oh my gosh, did you see Andrew swear there? And he claims to be a Christian. Look at that. Andrew raises money and he claims to be a Christian. And here he is grifting for money. That's not it. The idea isn't that like to embrace Christianity or to embrace like a culture or a country that embraces Christianity means that we all have to be poor and destitute. That's not it. Christ was a calling above us. He is stronger and better in every way than the rest of us. No one's suggesting that we have to live chronically in poverty. But what I am suggesting is this. Maybe it's time to realize that all those things in the immediacy that make you feel good, that you should have a duty to future generations and that we should set up a society like that. You see this meme a lot. In Canada, I see this a lot, and I know that's where you're from. In the United States, you're starting to see it with the older generation, the boomers, right? Where young people are like, fuck these boomers, because they used to be able to buy a house with, and this, that, and the other. But then the other part of it is, and now they're importing people that will hate me, right? And so in order for them to raise the prices of their properties, they brought in a bunch of foreigners, and they needed these foreigners because they didn't have enough kids, so the foreigners could give them end-of-life care, et cetera, et cetera. And so they're going out with a bang. Yes, we got all of our money. We did all this. And get a job, young man. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. But it's like, what have you done? The country that your parents had given to you and that their parents had given to them is going to be unrecognizable because of the shit that you pushed for. And you were like, we don't care. Bring in people. Everyone around. We're cultural relatives. All cultures are equal, right? We'll bring in people. We can bring in people from Somalia. They're basically the exact same as people from Appalachia. No, they're not. And once you bring them in, it's going to be real difficult to get them out. And once that sort of starts to infiltrate what our society and they get in positions of cultural or political leadership, I don't know what the answer is, how you change it.
Well, there's a few. I think the unfortunately, so this is what you just detailed was one of my starting positions for what I've talked about with the age thing, which is already kicked off and is going to become more and more prescient. We're seeing, just to look at the Troon community. I've said this on the Will Spencer podcast, that if you take the numbers that we know from about 1990s up until now, over 100,000 units of puberty blockers have been distributed. Right now, puberty blockers were originally developed as medication for pedophiles, right, to essentially to get rid of all sexual function. They're derivatives of that drug. So now over 100,000 kids over the last 30 years have been fed these things, and it's intensified over the last 10 years. So we can make a distinction between the man in a beard who just wants to go into women's washrooms and the 13-year-old kid who's been lied to, who's been deceived by his parents, by his medical facilities, by everybody, and been fed these things. And what happens with that kid as he reaches maturity, or she, and realizes that they've mutilated their bodies, they have no sexual function, that these things don't work, they're certainly not in a better place, and all of a sudden they live in a country where they can get a gun, or they can get a knife, or they can build a bomb, or whatever that. We've seen this with the Zizians, we're seeing this, of course, with Charlie Kirk and all these other acts of violence, right? It's coming out of that group. That's an army of the vengeful son, right? Like you have 10,000, how many thousands of kids who bought into this over the last 10 years? That's a saleable army. The other thing we're also seeing is there's this resentment that goes across party lines. This resentment towards the boomers. Resentment is liberalism. I think at the end of the day is a resentment factory, because it's telling you can have all these things, that these wonderful material goods are going to make you happy, and so you buy up all the material goods, and you realize like I'm still not happy, so it must be something wrong with me. So you go to therapy, or you take more drugs, or you watch more Netflix, or whatever, distraction, trying to chase that happiness. And that pursuit of happiness line is the most destructive thing the way it's been taken, because it's like people pursuing it, but they can never gain it. So they just build this resentment. The zero time preference almost guarantees you're going to be resentful because you don't get what you want, right? But you don't know what you want. You just see what other people are getting. You're like, well, why don't I have the $1 million home? Why don't I have this? Why don't I have that? Right? Have you done anything for it? And I'm not putting the blame on anybody, but it's like you want all these things. You don't know why you want all these things. You're resentful that these other people have had it and they're pushing it in your face. And yeah, and the wanting of these things have led to your situation. This is when I say everyone who's blaming the boomers is like, well, you just want what they want, what they had. And do you realize that them wanting what they had or getting what they had has led to this? So maybe we should rejigger what we want a little bit and get a bit more humble, get a bit more, take the responsibility onto ourselves. And the corollary to the vengeful son is the prodigal son, to return to the Father, to repent of our sins, and to begin to redeem both our boomers and both our country, rebuild these things and rebuild it right. Because, okay, things have gone wrong. You inherited the wrong system. We can have our sad moment. Now you get yourself up and you dust yourself off and we start building again. And we start saying no. And we start saying we're this is what we're going to do. And we're not going to ask permission. And I'm not saying break laws or doing of that. I'm saying you start building things. You can build a building, or you can build a community, or you can build your family. You can start doing these things because they're good, they're beautiful, they're true, and they're necessary. They're who we are. And to be in denial of who we are and denial of reality just leads to more of this. You don't like this? Great. There's the answer. It's just not the answer you want.
Well,
because that answer doesn't get you a mansion or a Mercedes-Benz. Maybe it does, but chances are probably not. But you know what? This current situation doesn't get you that either. You're just leasing those things, and everything else is falling apart.
It's one of the more difficult things to learn in life. Like, this is very cliche. I'm not the first person, nor will I be the last to say this, but you can't control what happens to you. You can control how you react to it, right? And like, for me, it's humbling when I did this work for years and years with adults with disabilities like autism, mental retardation, and a bunch of other crippling, debilitative diseases. I mean, I worked with people that were so severe that not only were they nonverbal, but they would have like permanent seizure, like almost 100% of the time their eyes would be seizing. It's just incredibly bad situation to be in, right? And it's easy for me to sit here and say, as someone who's been relatively healthy and who's been incredibly lucky in every aspect of my life. I was lucky to have parents that gave a shit. I was lucky to be born in the United States. I was lucky to be born in the generation I was. I was lucky to find a tremendous woman. I'm lucky that she's healthy and my son's been. All of this is luck, all of this, right? And so it's easy, and it sounds flippant for me to be like, yeah, sometimes bad things happen. Sometimes you're driving down the road and someone hits you in their car and it cripples you for life, and it's not your fault. But what can you do if you sit there and say, this is bullshit, I was given a rotten lot? Like, that's not going to end up with you in a better place than if you say, this sucks, but I need to do what's possible to move forward. And so I would say that also of the younger generation. You're right. This older generation failed you. My generation is currently failing you. It is. I'm 41. My generation's failing you. It certainly is. Right? But you have to try to make the best of it. And the truth is, if things continue to get as degenerate and materialistic as we see, if you have the right approach, you will be amongst a king amongst men, right? Because you'll actually be someone that's capable of being more self-sufficient and working, etc. Now, there's obvious other side to this as well, though. There comes a point where if things get so bad, then even if our future generations are able to correct the ship, it will require far more painful acts than elsewise would have been necessary. It may require a war. It may require just complete removal and separation from the country. All of that may be true. Here's something that I would say of the older generation. This is difficult to comprehend, but I mean this. And we could probably talk for hours on this thing. You see, it's easy to be like, it's selfish that you're like, more. Free sex for me. Forget about having kids. Like, that's easy. We can see how that's selfish. Want to know something else that's selfish? Virtue signaling. Right? Mm-hmm. That's selfish. You feel good because you said, you know what? Bring in the Somalians. Yes, they're just like me. Bring them in. And that felt good for those people that were voting for that. And it feels good to say, we don't want to deport people. They would say, that's me being the opposite of selfish. I'm willing to share. No, it's very selfish when you consider what it means for your progeny and for future generations of people. It's very selfish when you look at it through that perspective. It's comforting to just be like, well, I don't have much time left in my situation. Maybe I'm expecting to live another 40 years. Let's be honest, if we open the borders up today, I'll still be able to live a pretty successful life based on what I've already built. I'll be okay for the next 40 years. Right? I'll be all right. But what about your grandchildren? Or if you don't have grandchildren, what about your neighbor's grandchildren? Or what about the people that share your cultural values or shared the ancestry of our founding fathers? What about them? What about
legacy?
Your legacy. That's right. That's a great way. That's exactly it. What about them? And so people, they have it twisted. It's easy, right? I had someone tell me this once. And I have to be very careful because I'm not in any way, shape, or form endorsing any sort of political violence. I'm not. We're nowhere near to that being effective or necessary. The battles now will be fought through information. They'll be fought through culture, right? They'll be fought through hard work. It's not going to be violent. Violence is antithetical to that. The more you give in to these impulses of violence, all you're doing is helping the sort of authoritarians that want to crack down on you in the first place. So I'm not suggesting that. But I had a guy tell me once, he was like, if someone slapped you in the face, what would you do? And I was like, the right thing to do is walk away and just walk away. And they're like, and what if they slapped your child? I'm like, well, I wouldn't walk away. And he's like, isn't it selfish then to put yourself in the position where you're going to allow people in your community that will slap you and you've done nothing about it? Isn't that selfish? Because your child's eventually going to have to deal with that. And so what do you say? And it's like, it's a solid point. I see the violent aspect of it's just a representation that's easy to understand. So I'm not saying the correct answer is to slap back, but the correct answer is quite literally on actual policy things we can see. No, cashless bail might feel good, but it fucking sucks. And it's leading to victims. And it's going to lead to the next generations of people either A, going to have to continue to be victims and be fearful, or B, they're going to have to crack down more severely than you would have had to. They're going to have to make difficult decisions. And that's where we're at today. If the generation of Reagan wouldn't have fell for this mass amnesty bullshit that ended up reforming what the country looks like, or if you even go back to the 60s to the first immigration bill, that if you see Republican and Democrat alike were saying, oh my goodness, by no means would this mean that this country will become less white. Perish the thought. Because Republican Democrat back then would have been like, we won't accept that. So they bullshitted people. No, trust us, it'll be good. The people in positions of leadership didn't give a shit. They didn't care about their, what their constituents thought or about like sort of ethnic homogeneity. They didn't give a shit about that or religious. They did not care. Didn't care about it for white people. Didn't care. Because let's be honest, back then there was a strong black community too before sort of the war on poverty and shit. There were, and they didn't give a shit about all that. They said, fuck it, we'll just import people. And so generationally, we've accepted this bad deal. And eventually it's going to be left to either our children's children will find themselves waking up as strangers in their own country, or they're going to have to do some very difficult decisions. And it's going to be much worse than just like, let's just have a remain in Mexico policy. Let's have deportations where we're paying for people's flights. It's going to become much more severe than that. And I don't think that people understand that it's selfish to put that on our children and our children's children. And the same is true of like our robust welfare state. Someone's paying for that. Bernie Sanders ain't going to pay for it. He'll be long gone. Hey, listen, no hard feelings of Bernie. I wish him a long and healthy life. I'm not wishing for his demise. But by the time the check comes due, he'll be long gone. It'll be the grandchildren. They're the ones that are never going to get Social Security. They're the ones that through inflation aren't going to be able to buy a home until they're 60. And that's because we keep spending and spending and spending. And every time, whether it be Trump, whether it be Biden, whether it be Bush, Obama, whatever, we're always told next time, next budget, we'll get it under control. We'll start cutting back spending next time. And we never do. And inevitably, who that's putting the burden on is the young people. That's who's going to pay it at the end of the day. So absolutely agree with you that it's all about the framing. And you have to understand, like, look, sometimes you find yourself, history's cyclical. Every great empire has fallen. Every great empire that, as they were falling, had their children and their grandchildren going, what the fuck did you do? You were given this and you let it collapse? We stood on the shoulders of giants and through, incompetence or corruption, you allowed this to collapse. And now we are left to pick up the pieces. And so you try your best to have the best mentality and try to pick up those pieces. But for me, for my generation, being 40, what I'm trying desperately to do is to be the generation that stops the bleeding and to leave my son at least with a chance through his own efforts and hard work and good attitude to be very successful. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. one bitter white pill for people is that I think the American empire hasn't started yet, and we'll see how things go in the next short term. Anyway,
Elon's going to take us to the moon. We'll take over, or to Mars. We'll take over Mars.
Mars. Sure, why not? Quickly, I'll just read out some super chats and we'll let you go, Rob. Thank you again for coming on, man. This has been great.
I love it.
We got $5 from Teresa. I can't say that.
Teresa Shrek, right?
There you go. See, you're better at these things than I have to know. I have to learn the grift game from those who are good at it.
Just start playing whip songs. That's the key.
You have to undo the globalist grip before you can actually make the domestic change that matters. Totally agree. $10 from Kenneth Wells. Thank you so much. Another $10 from Kenneth Wells. End of the day, atheism is functionally pagan. Both put the self-will above everything else. It becomes power dynamics by default. Yeah, it's very pagan, Gnostic, centered on the self. Wittices, Harry giving out some memberships. Appreciate you. And again, another big $10 from Kenneth. History is spiral. Prepare the kids for a spiritual fight. Well, it's a perpetual spiritual war we're in, and that's not going away anytime soon. So, well, anyways, at least we're addressing the problem or having these conversations while we still can. And I think, thank you again, Rob.
Well, and I'll just say, I'll say in closing this, it's something that I say, we're talking about these difficult things. Please don't get blackpilled if you're listening to this.
No.
At the end of the day, first, if you're Christian, you know the end of the story, right? So there's no reason to blackpill ever about anything because you know the end of the story, right? But even beyond that perspective, like, by no means are we out of the fight. My goodness, heaven forbid. And, you know, I remember watching one time, I think it was on Tucker Carlson's show, this gentleman was talking about this Christian priest in Nagasaki, and after the bomb dropped. And they're picking up the pieces, and he holds congregation, and he says, how lucky are we that we were blessed by Christ, that we were targeted and not some other village, that we were given this opportunity. And that's sometimes how I think of things. Like, it's like, yes, there is a great challenge put forth, but would we want it any other way? Right? Like, I'm happy to live in interesting times. I'm happy to not be starving to death. I'm happy to not be in perpetual physical violence, but I'm also happy that I'm given an opportunity to hopefully do great works. And even if that great works is something simple as being a great father and being a great husband, then good. I do what I can in life. And then at the end of the day, I'll have to answer to myself, to my God, and to my family. And I'm trying to do what's best, in my opinion, to put them in the best possible situation, both in the here and now and generationally, for the people that came before me. When I die, I hope to meet the founding fathers. And I hope that they say, hey, man, you tried. You did good. You tried. That's what I want. So that's the position I'm trying to leave my country and the world in. And there's no reason to get depressed. It's an opportunity. Anytime that you have a crisis, it's an opportunity. So don't blackpill. It's all right. There's a lot of inspiration to take. So,
Rob, let the people know where they can consume all your products.
Well, you could find me primarily at Normal America with robnoerr, so it's just Normal America over on YouTube. I'm usually streaming roughly every weekday around noon Eastern time. We do a call-in show, so I'd love to have you call in. And then around 10 p.m. Eastern time. I'm also on Rumble at Normal America over there on Rumble. And then on places like X, Kick, etc., robnoerr, as you've seen it spelled there. So if you search any platform for robnoerr, as you've seen it spelled there, you'll be able to find me.
And you're working on a big project with the Crucible crowd, right?
That's true. Word War. So Word War is going to be the gold standard of debate. So I am working on that team. It's basically a brainchild of the comedian Sam Tripoli and Andrew Wilson. And the idea is that it's going to be the gold standard of debate. We're going to have events. Tickets are already on sale. If you go over to Word War and you search that in your search engine, you'll be able to get the website. We tried to keep the tickets affordable, so they're between $50 and $200, depending on the tier of ticket you get. It is going to be in Atlantic City at ACX1 Studios that's connected to Caesar's Palace. It's absolutely gorgeous. It hangs out over the boardwalk and over the Atlantic Ocean. The goal is that we're going to try to get huge names and basically treat them like top-tier athletes. We're sort of trying to combine what makes fun, like UFC or boxing, and combine that with debate. But we're also going to put on the best possible event for the people that show up in person and for the people that are watching back home. So it's going to be tremendous. You guys are going to lose your mind when you see some of of the names that we have connected to this that'll be debating. So yeah, that's going to be January 10th is the first event. There will be free viewing for the first 2 debates, and then the final debate will be a pay-per-view. We'll give you details on that later. And like I said, you could search Word War and be able to find the website. Tickets are quite affordable, but you should get them now, because once we start to announce the people that are in these debates, they're going to go very fast. So
Wow, I'm very excited to hear about that, man. I was just thinking the other day that the debates should have like the ring announcers kind of.
Oh yeah, we're doing it up, dude.
So,
How about entrances? Like people coming in, like you'd see in boxing, people like, where's some of what you see when you see, you're gonna be like, how did no one think of this? So I'm honored to just be doing a little part in it, but the team there's serious people behind this with serious sort of financial interest in this. So it's going to be excellent. There's going to be no expense spared to provide the best possible experience for both the debaters and for the audience. So
fantastic. Thank you again, Rob. Thank you for everyone who's watching. Thank you again for everyone who sent over the super chats. Of course, you're watching this in the future. Links in the description below how to support the show. And I am Jason Mironchuk, and it's later than you think. Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you. It was tremendous.
It was good.
I'm going to go talk about less happy things now. I'm going to talk about this National Guard shooting. Terrible. So, hey, I can't wait to talk to you again. Anytime you need anything, just let me know, man. It was absolutely a pleasure.
Same thing, man. I know if you ever need anything and I can help, just let me know.
All right, man. You take it easy. Thanks so much.
You too.
Right, bye. All right.
You're still live.
I'm alive. Oh, yeah. We're going to go until the wee hours of the morning. 2 hours until Thanksgiving here in the East. Yeah, it's very cool, guys. So I'm going to put his link up to his channel one more time. Check it out. Apologies to the people that put in super chats and ask questions. If it's my show, then sometimes I work those into the show. When I'm doing someone else's show, I don't want to interrupt the flow that the host is having. I do believe he is Russian Orthodox. He's definitely Orthodox. I think it is Russian Orthodox. But I could be wrong. It may be Eastern Orthodox. Yeah, so we're going to read all the super chats here. I'm going to go to the restroom and fill up my water real quick, though, if you don't mind. And so then we'll come back, we'll read super chats, and then we're going to talk about this National Guard shooting. What it means, what we know so far, what the details are, etc. So it's not the happiest of topics to address, but you know, increasingly, this is the sort of things that we're going to be looking at, these sorts of violent acts. So, but I will give you chair here to start, and then we'll get to the super chats, and then we'll jump right into the news. So I'll be right back. Chair, give him hell. Get him, chair. Ooh.
It's just me and you, chair. Everyone, chair. Round of applause for chair. Everybody, round of applause for chair. What a fantastic discussion. I wasn't paying attention, but I'm sure it was sure was fantastic. Oh. What was that, chair? The audience hasn't said enough donos. What? You hear that? Chair's heckling you guys at the audience. What was that? Oh, he currently sees robnoerr go to the restroom and fill his water bottle. Send those donations in. Now's the time to do it. He's coming
It's gonna
back.
sound morbid. Uh-huh. I caught the corner of that, Avarice. I saw what's going on there. It's gonna sound very morbid, but my family's not here tonight. Normally my family's downstairs, but they're over at my wife's mother's house helping prepare Thanksgiving for tomorrow. I think my wife's job is rolls, stuffing balls, and I think she's doing chocolate pie. But obviously she's helping her mom prepare stuff, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Russian Orthodox is Eastern Orthodox. Greek Orthodox is the description from the bishop. Fair enough. So yes, shows you how little I know. We'll talk just a little about that conversation, and then read super chats. Anyways, what I was saying is going to sound a little morbid. This would be a good night that I could yell and scream about all sorts of stuff because my family's not here. So normally I'm yelling and my wife will text me like, could you keep it down a little? You're waking everyone up. But I don't know. It feels sadder than anything today with these National Guard. Can someone tell me, right before I came on, I was seeing conflicting reports. At first I'd read that the governor had said that both of the National Guard members that were shot had passed away. And then I saw that they said there was conflicting reports. Has anyone seen if they've made a confirmation? It didn't look good. But much like with Charlie Kirk, you pray and you hope the best for them. They're both in critical condition. Hopefully they somehow pull through. But my goodness, just if you're religious, if you're Christian tonight, please take time to pray for them and their families. What a horrible, horrible situation the day before Thanksgiving.
They're
Stare.
not releasing
Oh, I
that
don't have
stuff.
my headset on. I'm sorry, Avers. Go ahead. Premonition says they passed it.
They're not
Go ahead,
releasing
Avers.
anything.
What's that?
They're not releasing anything.
Okay. Yeah. Not good. Not good at all. So, but please consider praying for them and their families. And we're going to get to that. Real quick, really enjoyed the interview there with Jason. I thought it went great and very smart dude, very great channel. So particularly if you're Orthodox, I recommend checking him out. But even if not, I think that he is a really, smart guy who's a lot of fun to talk to. So please check his channel out. I really hope that you will. And I think he deserves a few more subs. So please, one more time, we're going to put that link out and head on over there. Give him a sub. It's free. Check him out someday. Oh, look at that. EOD's on it. Nonetheless, I'll put it as well. Christian nationalism is something that I've warmed up to in the way in which I define it. This doesn't mean that I want like the Orthodox Church to be the official church of the United States and everyone to be forced to be Orthodox or Catholic or any other denomination. That's not what I'm saying. But I hope I articulated why I think that it's important to base our culture and our politics around sort of the values of Christianity. And I hope that it was an informative discussion for you. I by no means think that I am the premier authority on Christianity. In fact, I'm hopefully quite open on how I'm not. And I'm not here to tell you what denomination you should be or to criticize specific denominations. That's beyond the scope of where I feel I am in my journey with Christ. And so I'm not going to do that. But hopefully you still got enjoyment and some information out of that. I really enjoyed it. So some super chats, which I hope that you'll continue to get in. Call me GL, 10 memberships. Unbelievable. Thank you so much. And then becomes a member himself, says, just finished work. Here you go. Hey-oh, here you are. Hey-oh, thank you. Our good friend, How Long Nate, $5 says, W gifted members. Now go like and share the stream quickly. Thank you, Nate. And then another 10 says, Rob knows it's dead air. Go hit the like and share. Oh, yes, at the beginning there. So this is something I always struggle with. I like to come on before I start an interview or a debate. so that I could set the stage like, okay, we're going to do the debate and then I'm going to stream afterwards. So I like to do that. But then oftentimes what happens is you'll go backstage and you don't want to really stream the backstage conversation because sometimes you're just talking logistics and stuff like that. So yes, if you're just tuning in, there was a little bit of dead air where it looked like I was talking, but I had muted myself because I was talking to Jason and we were working out the details of the show there. Chicken Pork Adobo, $2 says happy Thanksgiving, Robert Noerr and the Noranians. Thank you so much. Always appreciate. AJC, $10 says, hit the like. Everyone have a safe Thanksgiving. Enjoy your time with your loved ones. Every day is a blessing. God bless, not one step back. Thank you so much. Now, if you were considering donating tomorrow, I don't think I'll be streaming it all tomorrow. I think I'm going to be gone almost all day, and I considered doing an evening stream, but I don't think I'm going to do that. So, if you were planning on donating tomorrow, you'd go ahead and sneak those donations in tonight, and it'll work out just fine. So thank you. Naughty Germ, $5 as always. Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it. Zach Yelpy, $20 says, gentlemen, not sure if it's true, but I heard that most of our companies, including companies like BlackRock, is owned by British companies. I tend to not believe it, but I was wondering if you've heard or know anything about that. I'm not going to go as far as Jason did at saying that like London sort of owns all this and is making all the decisions. What I will say is I fully am aware that a lot of these places are owned by foreigners, or even if it's not foreigners, like Bill Gates is an American. I don't think he has the vested interest of the United States and the citizens of the United States before his own interest and sort of a globalist interest. So it's sort of a horse apiece. It's one of the things I talked about a lot with the idea of, forget about the laws, though there are laws on the book like FARA violations, etc. But if you go back to the Crossfire Hurricane, right? The idea that it's like, oh my goodness, can you imagine if a foreign country, was pushing propaganda in order to sway our elections? Well, when it really comes down to it, what's the difference between a foreign country or a corporation that doesn't have the interest of the US citizen at heart? Like if Microsoft spent 20% of their worth influencing one of our elections in, quote, legal ways, would that be markedly different than if they were based out of Spain and did the same? Is anyone really going to argue that Microsoft's like, oh, we're America first. We're all about the United States doing better than other countries? Of course not. So it's an interesting, the same sort of reason that we have. It's like, maybe we don't want foreign countries, massively influencing our political system would also apply to large multinational corporations that don't really give a shit about the people of this country. I don't really see what the difference would be. Mr. B, $20 says, I'm black-pilled, not ashamed to say it anymore. The pattern will follow. Trump and Republicans will sound very tough on X. And then the story will disappear from the news cycle in 1 week max. Zero faith in our leaders in the GOP. We'll talk about that in context of this shooting of the National Guard. I promise. We'll get to that.
Don't be black-pilled.
But don't be black-pilled, right. Vernon Desert, $5 says, should the work start in the home because a system is a consequence of its people? Of course. In fact, not only should it start at home, the work should start with you, the individual, right? If you're going to be a good father and a good husband and a good leader of your home, then you have to work on yourself first so that you'll be making good decisions. Then you work on your home. Then you work on your community. Then you work, it all branches out. It starts with you, and then it branches out from there. So yes, when we're talking about cultural or political change, of course, it starts with you, the individual, and then you at home. Totally agree. Wills, thanks so much. $5. Really appreciate it, man. Always do. Lavin, $20. Thanks so much. Says, I see lefties lose their minds when they feel that they hate having conservative Christian values imposed on them, but they have no issue imposing their values on everyone else. That's absolutely correct. Absolutely. Fuck it button. $5. Trust the science. I am the science. Oh, snap. Well, good. I could win that next debate. I'll be like, I know the guy that is the science. It's no longer Dr. Fauci. It's F it button. So, anaphylactics Chris Delany. Delany? So, well, says cruises. Okay. Thank you. Taylor TC, $5 says, being an American isn't an ethnicity. It's a creed. That the only way it works. If we don't have that common thread, the grand experiment is dead. Totally agree. JJ Beans, $5 says, later fees. Thank you so much. And then Chris again, $10 says chair. Thank you. Bruce gives $5, says, thanks for the stream, Rob. Nice to hear someone who is not black-pilled. Of course, my pleasure. Vita, $2. Always great to hear from you, my friend. Says, bring chair back. Sorry. It's busy lifting up my fat ass. And James, not Jimmy, member for 7 months, says, less than a Big Mac a day to keep the degens away. Ah, thank you so much. All right. So let's get into it. Not the funnest of topics. I'm sort of soft, if I'm completely honest with you. I could be a fierce fighter for the issues I believe in when it comes to debate and for advocating for things. But I take no pleasure when there are horrible things like assassination attempts or active assassinations or murders that are carried out. Anyone who went back and watched my streams after the Trump assassination attempt in Butler, which is from around my neck of the woods, or after the horrible assassination of Charlie Kirk, could see that there are days you really look forward to streaming and the issues that you'll be talking about, even if it's me bitching about, Republicans or Trump or whatever. And then there are days like this, which I take absolute no pleasure in. But it's important. It's important to stare in the face what we're looking at and to the best of our ability try to sift through it. And so I hope that I'm able to do that. So I'm going to try to approach this with as little hyperbole as possible, though we'll see. I guess we'll leave the muse take me wherever it does. Here's what I know. Obviously, I haven't been following the news for the past couple hours, but here's what I know. In D.C., 2 National Guard members were shot. I believe I heard by a man with a revolver. I believe at least one of them and possibly both were unarmed with firearms. Another National Guard member with a pocket knife ran up and attacked the assailant. And then finally the assailant was subdued by a National Guardsman with a gun. I'm hearing conflicting reports, premonitions telling me that they have passed, that the 2 Guards members have passed. Other people were saying that they haven't announced that they've passed, but that it was critical condition for both. I would say that regardless of what the situation is, it's very serious. And even if through all prayers, these people were able to pull through, which is probably not likely, their lives are going to be forever changed because of this. And it's a absolute terrible situation. Now, before we get to who the assailant was, and we will get there, let's start with this. Was this a left-winger? We don't know. I understand the impulse for people on any sort of, anytime that there's something like this, everybody, myself included, is waiting and chomping at the bit to blame their ideological opposition. I understand that. I'm guilty of that as well, and it's something I don't like about myself, and I've been honest with this. You hear about some mass shooting or you hear about a politician that's been attacked or something, and you're like, oh, I hope it wasn't someone from our ideological side. So I get it. People were commenting on what they thought was to blame early. The left does this, the right does it, everyone does. Do I fault people that have seen the rhetoric about the National Guard, about military that's been deployed, about ICE? Do I understand why people are going to say, you see what happens? Do you see what happens when you demonize? When you say Trump's sending the military to go after black people or go after Hispanic people or brown people, or he's illegally sending the military to go after American citizens? Does it make sense that someone may take literally what's being said there and go commit an act of violence? Of course. This doesn't mean that it couldn't be that there was another, a right-winger or, a racist, whatever, that did this. And the same was true even as we found more details of Charlie Kirk assassination. The overwhelming amount of circumstantial evidence and logic dictated that this was probably a left-winger. Why? Charlie Kirk was one of the most effective people for the right. Then, once we got more details and they wrote stuff like, catch this fascist, all but parroting the language that the left makes. Anyone on the right that would have criticized Charlie Kirk would have probably been more likely to be called a fascist themselves than to call Charlie Kirk a fascist. So it made sense. Now, I still open the possibility that anything could happen. It could be that someone intentionally wrote that message in order to throw people off their scent. That's possible. But based on the evidence that we saw, it was most likely that this was going to be a left wing. Of course, the very people that wanted to fanned the flames of saying people should be censored for things like stochastic terrorism when it came to alleged right-wingers committing acts of violence, and even went so far as to say that Donald Trump engaged in an insurrection and tried to keep him off the ballot when he said things like fight like hell. That language to them was evidence of him inspiring people to violence. And yet, when they repeatedly call the right fascist, Nazis, etc., then when someone parrots that rhetoric and shoots and kills a prominent right-winger, they're like, how dare you? How dare you even suggest that we have anything to do with this? If held to their own standards, they ought to be ashamed. But of course, they don't care. And we've talked about this with Charlie Kirk. It's not just fringe people. Yes, you had huge swaths of people that actively celebrated the murder of Charlie Kirk. But you had a lot of people that said the right thing. Well, we don't want him to die. Maybe many of them believed it. And yet, simultaneously, they proceeded to continue to call him a fascist. Even organizations such as the New York Times that quoted something that Charlie had said on his podcast that was, quote, anti-Semitic, only to then have to offer a retraction the next day because although it is true that Charlie Kirk said those things, he was quoting someone else and then criticizing them. This is horrific. The truth is, when you spend years upon years upon years upon years of calling your opposition literal Nazis and fascists, inevitably, your audience may take you at your word.
A premonition. If you have that article with what condition they're in, I would like that. If you could put that in the chat, that'd be fantastic. Right now, Rob, I currently have still 2 critical as of 17 minutes ago.
Okay. So we'll be praying. We'll be praying for them. Now, I saw that it was confirmed earlier. The governor confirmed it. Then the governor came out and said, never mind. It is not confirmed. So if you have something from hours ago, perhaps more recent evidence shows that. So I understand this. And, there's this game that's played. And I've been talking about this from the perspective of the left from a long time. Way back to circa 2014. Is it okay to punch a Nazi when Richard Spencer got punched in the face? You could draw a straight line from the people like, of course, why not? And then it's everyone we disagree with is one of those. That's what happens. And they don't let up, even when the attack occurs. If you're just tuning in, 2 National Guard members were shot in D.C. So, I understand in that context why you would jump to the conclusion that this would be a left-winger. But I try to be careful, and I try to not jump to conclusions. I'm not perfect. Sometimes I do, but I tried my best. It looks as if the person has been identified. Now, is there a chance that it is not as it seems and the identification is inaccurate? Maybe. But at this point, it looks like pretty much
He's
like
identified.
all official people, including the media and people in the political sphere, are saying the person's name and identifying him. So
not good.
I'll put this up. One sec. Oh, sorry. Share my screen here. Afghan National Guard shooter Rahmanullah Lakhanawi is an illegal migrant let in under Biden and Mayorkas Operation Allies Welcome, per Fox. He was allowed to come in with a visa and then he overstayed it. And here is Fox's reporting on this. Or maybe this is just... so this is the scene where they're offering aid to the guardsmen that had been shot. It appears, and most of what I'm seeing is confirming this, that I've seen this is the name that's been confirmed, and I've seen people saying over and over again that this person came in 2021 under Operation Allies during the Biden administration. Here's Stephen Miller sort of discussing a portion of this.
And the Biden administration, the Democrats have inflicted on this nation the worst national security threat in our history. We've never faced a threat like this. 20 million people brought into our country from the most failed societies on earth. Afghanistan, Somalia, Libya, Iraq, brought here. No vetting, no conditions, no rules. Brought here on visas, brought here as refugees, brought here as asylees, brought here as illegals. Brought here in every way imaginable, by plane, train, bus, automobile, by land, by sea. For 4 straight years, they deluged this country. And now more blood is being spilled as a result. What you heard tonight from President Trump, the breaking news here tonight, is saying that his government is going to accelerate efforts to review every person added to this country over the last 20 years, or the last 4 years, all 20 million. Now, obviously, if you're illegal, you're out automatically. But everybody else who was brought here, refugee, asylum status, whatever status, as he said, if you're not someone who loves this country, if you're not adding benefit to this country, then we're going to send you out of this country. Because it's enough already. No one else has to die. No one else has to be murdered. No one else has to be shot. No more empty seats are needed at the Thanksgiving table or the Christmas table because of what Democrats have done to this country. So tonight we heard from a commander-in-chief a historic announcement, a brave announcement, exactly what America needed to hear, Kellyanne.
So I want to be clear. Is there always a chance that what we're being told will be revised, that this wasn't the person that they thought it was, that this person didn't come in when they thought? Yes, there's a chance that it'll be revised. Is there a chance that this is some nefarious conspiracy and that this person's being set up as a patsy by a foreign government, our own government, et cetera, like many people claim about Charlie Kirk? Of course, that's a possibility. We will go forth under the assumption that the information that's been provided by official sources at this point are accurate. That this guy was someone from Afghanistan that came in under 2021 during the Biden administration under Operation Allies. Right? So let's start there. And there's an awful lot to talk about. Now, I debated person after person about the failed Afghanistan withdrawal. Let me be clear. I absolutely supported withdrawing from Afghanistan. And I was quite vocal about it. And I was quite vocal that it was one of the things that I actually supported Joe Biden on. Still to this day, it was the right move to withdraw. The problem is the way in which the withdrawal happened was farcical. I've had this debate literally over a dozen times with all sorts of people on the left. They shut down a secure base, Bagram Air Base, that our military had control over. They shut it down and then relied on evacuation from a public airspace, relying on Al-Qaeda the Taliban for protection, for security for that airfield. And you know the results. American service members were killed, 13 of them, in addition to allies of America and civilians that were standing around. Over and over, I debated this issue. There was footage of people literally hanging to the wings of airplanes trying to flee Afghanistan. It was insane. It was such a rushed withdrawal that it was impossible to vet the people that were getting on these planes. Of course, U.S. civilians, U.S. troops, that's one thing. But the myriad of Afghanis that we were bringing back. Of course, then I was like, how do we know that these people, this is a country that we were just at war with for 20 years. How do we know that we're not bringing to the United States the very people that we were fighting? Islamic extremists, terrorists, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, etc. How do we know? And over I was told, trust us, these people are vetted. Then every once in a while I would read a story that the mainstream media would cover. One of the stories I remember reading was at the particular base that we brought these people from Afghanistan to, there were literally just people walking away, just walking off the base. And yet I was told over and over, no, these people were vetted. Everyone that we brought back from Afghanistan was heavily vetted. Are you sure? Now I'm all for bringing the people that actually helped our great soldiers over there. Or there be translators, people in the military that helped? And of course, is there a chance that you could be duped? And maybe that's who this gentleman was. Of course, that's a possibility. But the idea of the flippancy in which so many Biden supporters said, of course, they've all been vetted, of course, was laughable. And now it may be that someone that was brought in that very situation was a terrorist that just possibly killed 2 National Guard members. In addition, what Stephen Miller is talking about there, not just the specific bringing of people through Operation Allies or whatever there from Afghanistan, but the general open border allowing tens of millions in unvetted illegals across the border. One of the things that I think about a lot is double standards. Now, our friend Hall Long Nate, truck driver, calls in a lot and has been quite generous with donations. I really, really can't thank you enough, Nate. One of the things I talk about when it comes to sort of trucking in the United States is it's not just how easy it is for foreigners, including those that can't speak the language, to get CDLs. That's bad enough. We see the results. Devastating wrecks that's leading to people dying, etc. But when you juxtapose that with how stringent they are when it comes to regulations for actual American-born truckers, it becomes even more laughable. The regulations on your vehicles, the regulations on your logbooks, the regulations for the drivers themselves, not just in the form of the initial licensing and testing that's required, but also the constant maintenance and upkeep. You have to have a physical at least every 2 years. Then once you get to a certain age, every year. Did you know that if you're caught with almost any amount of alcohol in your blood, even if you're not driving, your work truck, and even if it doesn't qualify to the level of a DUI, you could lose your CDLs? Did you know that? And yet at the same time, we're being so strict. My father-in-law, who's a truck driver who drives oversized loads, you wouldn't believe the arduous regulations they have to go through. Just to be able to drive, you have to have a road permitted. You have to have, depending on the state, each state's different, how many escort drivers you need. If you go through New York State, they'll actually do things like your escort car. They'll sit there with a stopwatch and time the rotations of the lights on top. The outer lights have to spin at a different rotational speed than the inside, and they have to be met through some very specific stringent standards. And yet, simultaneously, while this is occurring, we allow these people that can't even speak English to come in. Yeah, put them behind the wheel of a truck, give them a license, good to go. That's how I feel about so many issues in this country. If I want to go through an airport, I have to go through x-rays machines. I have to get filled up by TSA. I have to have a real ID now. I'm supposed to have it. Meanwhile, we just let millions of illegals in. Now, the reason that it's so stringent to go through TSA is because of terrorism. We just don't know. After 9/11, that's why we need the Patriot Act. That's why we need all these infringements on our privacy. And yet, simultaneously, we just open the floodgates and allow millions upon millions of unvetted people in. During COVID, we were all locked down. And yet, they allowed people that literally had COVID to come in through the southern border. Didn't matter. This frustration in the double standard is what's not tenable. One set of rules for us, the law-abiding, another set of rules for the people that are not from this country that came here the wrong way illegally. Now, what did you think the predictable results would be? The truth is, terrorism is a threat. Of course, particularly Islamic terrorism. And so though I disagree with things like the Patriot Act, I can at least hypothetically see the rationale for it. And yet, at the same time that we're told as American citizens we have to give up our rights, we've allowed the border to be open so that the terrorists could walk right in. What if there are serious terror cells in this country that were allowed in, along with tens of millions of other illegals, just in a 4-year period under Joe Biden? We have no fucking clue. Do any of you have faith that our government is keeping tabs on these people? They have no clue. They just tell us we're racist if we notice. Excuse me, I don't like my Fourth Amendment right to privacy being violated. I don't like being filled up when I go to the airport in the name of fighting terrorism. So maybe you could, at the very least, if you're going to ask that from me and all the other citizens of this country, you can at least make sure that the people that predictably may be more closely associated with these Islamic terrorist groups aren't just coming and going as they please as illegals. Can you make sure they're vetted before you let them in? No, that's too much. If you're against the Patriot Act and if you're against that, you're selfish. How dare you? You're selfish. But if you say, okay, well, I want the people that aren't from this country that are trying to get in the country to go through just as, if not more arduous a purpose, policy, then you're racist. And now we'll see the Biden defenders, the Democrats say, how dare you? How dare you? How dare you say that Biden's responsible for this? How dare you say his policies? Of course, in any given situation, it's difficult to say that the direct line is because of some sort of administration. I'll fully concede that. But at the end of the day, when you're so flippant and you just allow millions upon millions of people in, when you allowed people basically piling in at a rapid pace as the last plane out from Afghanistan, and then you bullshitted us, oh, trust us, bro, they're all vetted, trust us. The predictable results would be we're not going to know who these people are. And there's negative consequences. If it's going to be, fuck it, we don't care about terrorism, fine. Then get rid of the Patriot Act. Get rid of all the feeling up at TSA. But why make the punishment in the process more harsh for us, the law-abiding people, than the fucking illegals? It goes back, go back again. It's easy to look at COVID and see how this was possible. Not only were we told that as the citizens of this country, we had to do all sorts of things, sometimes lockdowns, sometimes vaccine mandates, etc., while simultaneously they literally allowed illegals in and people coming across the border who they knew had COVID. But it's very similar to this. I talk about this a lot. We were told that if we wanted to go to work, if we wanted to send our kids to school, if we wanted to go to the public park, if we wanted to go to a friend's wedding, wow, that was selfish. If we did those things, what did we want grandma to die? Because hypothetically, we could go to those things, contract the disease, and somehow bump into grandma, and then she would die. That's what we were told. Simultaneously, in states like mine, in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and other states, they literally forced nursing homes to accept COVID patients, thereby killing grandma. And when people like me pointed out in real time, what the fuck is going on? This is insane. This double standard is insane. We were told to shut our mouths and trust the science. How is this any different? The government surveillance tools, more and more sophisticated to see every email we send, every phone call we make, every text message. Patriot Act still on the books, baby. Still getting filled up through TSA. Meanwhile, tens of millions of people, we don't know who the fuck they are coming through the southern border. Or overstaying visas. Even with the most staunch immigration policies and vetting of people, is it possible that someone could come in and still do some heinous act of terrorism? Of course. So therefore, is it fair to say in any individual situation, had we had a different president, that this wouldn't have occurred? Of course not. But my goodness, can we stop pretending that it wasn't a foreseeable consequence of allowing tens of millions of people in this country illegally, that shit like this could eventually happen? And while I sympathize with the fact that, yes, it is political to jump on the bandwagon and say, this is because Democrats' rhetoric, or this is because the disastrous immigration policies of the Biden administration. I understand. But let's not pretend like the Democrats aren't just as bad as jumping to conclusions, if not worse. Remember Parler? Does anyone remember it? Parler at one point in this country was the most downloaded app in the Apple Store and the Droid Store. Largely it was because January 6th happened. You see, people were saying some dangerous shit on Parler. And then people stormed the Capitol. Where were the Democrats? Where were they? Were they like, this is outrageous? How could you blame an app like Parler? That's outrageous. No. Were they saying it was outrageous to try to blame Donald Trump? No. No, instead they were saying that this sort of language was dangerous and either directly calling for the censorship or ignoring it. Now, though, it's different. Now, when they want to scream fascist, when they want to say that ICE is the Gestapo, when they want to say that the National Guard will be targeting civilians and illegal behavior, etc., they're like, how dare you say that could contribute to this? Now, I've defended their right to call Trump a fascist, and if that's what they seek fit. I think that it would behoove them to be ethical in talking about the need for violence being absurd and how we need to crack down and go after people as hard as possible. But of course, it's the exact opposite. They say that your language is violence. Shit, you could take someone like Destiny saying, oh my God, but Trump said now every Republican should fear for their life to be in public. And yet, when we see violence occur over and over and over again, directed at Republicans, directed at service members, etc., then it's different. People will scream and gnash their teeth about platforming Nick Fuentes, but they don't have a shit about Hassan Piker. America deserved 9/11, right? I say, fuck it. Let them both speak. But interesting. Interesting, isn't it? The double standard that's employed. Yes, let's play devil's advocate. But Rob, isn't it true that the right engages in double standards as well? Of course, we all do, as I admitted. Difference is the left has teeth. They're able to pressure social media like Apple to remove a store like Parler. They're able to try to keep Trump off the ballot and have a court decide because of his language saying things like fight like hell meant that he was engaged in an insurrection. Whatever you do, don't recognize the problem. Don't say, geez, we have National Guardsmen being executed on the streets by people shouting Allahu Akbar. Don't notice that. Don't do that. That's racist. How many people with that mentality have we brought into this country that are just waiting to take similar actions? So good on the left for correctly pointing out, look, you don't have proof that this was a left-winger. Turns out, probably Islamic probably tended to vote left-wing. Maybe not, though. But I'm willing to say Islamic terrorism is different than left-wing terrorism. Okay, fair enough. But if only the left got half as much agitated as, actual ICE agents, National Guard agents being attacked like this, as they did with getting super pissed off and angry when people suggest it may be connected to left-wing rhetoric, then maybe we would be somewhere. Isn't it amazing how quickly they make themselves, how dare you accuse our rhetoric? This is outrageous what's happening to us. They're very good at it, though. It's how they made Jimmy Kimmel the real victim of Charlie Kirk being assassinated. A piece of shit who implied lies about the shooter being Republican. They're very good at it. They're the real victims in this situation, don't you see? And here comes a part of the conversation it's really difficult to talk about. I cannot stress this enough. The a priori thing here is still praying that hopefully these guardsmen can pull through if they're still alive. There's conflicting reports. And if not, that God be with their families. But once more, we can see the inevitable turnout of what happens with these disastrous left-wing policies like open border policies. Feels different, doesn't it? This feels different. An act of terrorism, day before Thanksgiving. Republicans are going to rise up, and they're going to say, this time it won't stand. Oh, I'm sorry, no. This will be out of the news cycle in 2 weeks. Guaranteed. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Republicans will do nothing. At all. Maybe they'll use it as an excuse for some sort of foreign policy initiative. Need to bomb Syria or some shit. Who knows? They ain't going to do shit. They're not going to do shit legislatively. Trump may try to ramp up deportation stuff, but Republicans in Congress, they ain't going to do shit in the House or Senate. At all. Not only will they not do shit legislatively, they won't even do anything when it comes to the narrative. They won't. Within 2 weeks, the Democrats will be able to successfully make themselves the victim of this. And the Republicans will go, oh, we don't know. They're already doing it, by the way. Just listen to their lapdogs in the mainstream media. Here's MSNBC, or what do they call it now? MS Now. Here's what they had to say.
But of course, there's so much controversy happening in the United States right now with ICE, who are also wearing uniforms and wearing masks. And so there's, you don't know, people walking around with uniforms in an American city. There are some Americans that might object to that. And so apparently this shooting has happened.
You see? Already at 3 p.m. today, when most people hadn't even heard of this story. MSNBC, the mainstream media, already. Well, Trump's deploying the National Guard in ways people don't like, so you understand why something like this would happen. Already! They're shameless. They don't give a fuck. Trump's fault. There you go. And they're going to win the narrative battle. They will. I guarantee they will. I guarantee it. Republicans will come out beating their chest for a day or two. This is outrageous. And then they'll quickly tell you how outrageous it is that Tucker Carlson interviewed Ian Carroll or some shit like that. And that'll be the big attack, while the Democrats will remain singularly focused. Hey, you remember when a left-winger climbed on top of a building and shot at ICE agents and killed 2 detainees? What was the result of that? Ho-hum. remember when he killed that dude in Portland? We already know the end result of this. We already know. Nothing. Nothing will change. Nothing at all. And it's weird. In the moment, it feels weird. It's how it felt with Charlie Kirk. I even fell for it with Charlie Kirk. This is it. This is a change. Surely Republicans will rise up and say, this is outrageous. They won't. They won't. That's the truth. So it's best to just temper your expectations right now. Nothing's going to happen. Just so we're clear. If anything happens, it'll be purely through executive order, which then a bunch of left-wing judges will fight tooth and nail every step of the way, and Republicans in Congress will do nothing. They won't even keep the narrative up, unless it's to bomb a foreign country. That's it. Now, the important lesson is we can't rely on these Congress. First, primary these fuckers in Congress. They're terrible. They're shit. Primary them. Secondly, you're going to have to make the change yourself and culturally. The rot is so deep, it's going to take generations to fix. But we can start now. Like we were talking with Jason Mironchuk there. Start at home. But there is no help. There is no help coming from Congress. There's none. Let's read some super chats. Germanicus, $10. Thank you. Says, I know we would be best of friends. God bless. A couple of bucks for the Scott Adams love the other day. My prayers are with Scott Adams. He's in the hospital as we speak. He's not doing well. Hopefully there's a miracle and it turns around for him. But he's someone who's been deeply influential to me as a streamer and as a person. And so I'll be praying for him. And I hope you all will as well. F it button, $5 says, you really can't hate the news enough. That didn't justify it or anything. Not at all. You're crazy for thinking it did. How extreme of you. Yeah, that Trump's deployments of the National Guard led to this. Our good friend Zach Gelby, $10 says, as you're saying, Republicans need to have the narrative. This is why we would need to ramp up deportations. And it's due to the dangerous treasonous policies of Biden that we need to do this. I don't disagree, but they won't. Again, maybe Trump will push. But does anyone really expect there to be any legislative push? Of course not. Does anybody expect Congress to do anything about the judges, to try to impeach judges that are going to stymie any effort that the Trump administration has? Of course not. Barbareth Nazarene, $20 says, enforcing immigration laws in America? Say it ain't so. Of course not. It is depressing. Here we have a staff writer at The New Yorker. She says, This is so tragic, so unnecessary. Those poor guardsmen should have never been deployed. I live in D.C. and watched as they had virtually nothing to do but pick up trash. It was all for political show, and at what a cost. You don't hate the media enough. You see, it's law enforcement, National Guard being used as law enforcement. It's their fault. They were there. If only they not been on that street, then that violent, homicidal Islamic guy that was left in under the Biden administration would have had to choose a different target. Cool, Vic. Thanks for the raid, man. Really appreciate it. Cool, Vic. Excellent channel. Anyone who doesn't know, please, please, please check out Cool Vic's channel. We'll put the link up there. Excellent dude. There's his channel. Please head over there right now. Give it a sub. We're talking about the tragic and horrific shooting of 2 National Guards members. Please take this with a grain of salt. But this is being reported. One of the National Guard soldiers shot in today's attack has been identified as Andrew Wolf of Inwood, West Virginia. Wolf is still believed to be in critical condition and has been undergoing surgery for several hours. Please pray for Andrew and his family. I hope all of you will pray for him as well. And I really am hoping that he's somehow able to pull through. It's bad enough to know something like this happened, but to be able to put a face to it, it's gut-wrenching. Bill Crystal, ladies and gentlemen. This is a tweet from August 16th, 2021. Almost every Afghan refugee will turn out to be so much better an American than Charlie Kirk. Are you starting to see the hatred they have for you? Here's Jen Psaki. Press Secretary, August 27th, 2021.
DHS has been working closely with agencies across government, including our military, diplomats, intelligence community, and law enforcement professionals, and many others, to ensure that all Afghans are screened and vetted prior to being allowed into the United States. Additionally, all evacuees will continue to undergo extensive COVID-19 and public health precautions, including immediate COVID-19 testing and offered vaccines upon arrival. DHS will also coordinate with numerous other federal agencies to ensure that relocated Afghans have access to medical care and sufficient support to enable their successful resettlement in the United States.
Job well done. Margot Cleveland puts out. City overwhelmed by crime, DC. Government sends in extra law enforcement. Criminal shoots and kills law enforcement. The left. It's the government's fault for giving the criminal a target. Sorry, it's just reading some more of the news there. Let's read some more super chats. Part 2. Zach, $10. Thank you. Says, sadly, it won't happen because Republicans are weak. Right. They won't issue mass deportations. As suggested there. Totally agree. 10 go. $5 says, one of your best shows tonight. National government's cooked. Time to find yourself a red state, relocate, and focus on local issues. God bless. Airborne Animal. Thanks so much. $10 says, the guy better be charged with capital murder. As horrible as it is, maybe, just maybe, this will get those lazy politicians to do something. It's aggravated how cowardly they are. Sigh, prayers. You know? Gorilla Biscuit, thanks so much for the gifted membership. Really appreciate it, man. I saw someone in the chat said, is there anything wrong with what Jen Psaki said? Yes, maybe it was the fact that we could see in real time people literally hanging on the wings of airplanes to get in planes from Afghanistan to the United States as our soldiers were being blown up because of the disastrous policies of Joe Biden. We had to rely on the Taliban, who, according to the official Biden administration narrative, I can't stress this enough. The Biden narrative is as follows. We left Bagram Air Base. The Taliban then goes into Bagram Air Base and frees the prisoners that were there, who were ISIS, and then ISIS bombs U.S. troops as the very Taliban that freed ISIS was then being asked by the Biden administration to protect our troops. Let me repeat that. The Biden administration well knew that the Taliban freed ISIS and then said, excuse me, Taliban, because of the way we've done this withdrawal, we can no longer protect this civilian airbase. So please, Taliban, who just freed ISIS, will you protect us? And then predictably, ISIS attacked and killed 13 U.S. service members. Don't worry, though. The Biden administration then, in a very competent way, finally got back at ISIS-K. Oh, I'm sorry, no. They actually blew up the family of a translator. And that's all she wrote. We just forgot about that. Meanwhile, as we see the disastrous footage of the rushed withdrawal, and people like me raised questions, said, are we vetting all these people that in a mad scramble were hanging on to the wings of airplanes and filing into these last planes out? Did we vet them all? Of course we did, says the Biden administration, including Jen Psaki. All of them are going to be vetted. Really? With the same sort of enthusiasm that you vetted the target of ISIS-K that you bombed, that turned out to be an Afghani that was helping the United States and his family? Forget about all that. Trust them. That's what we were told. Reading some more news here real quick. Just and the day before Thanksgiving, I can't get over it. Thanks, Gorilla Biscuit, for another gifted membership. I just can't get over it. It's horrible. Some guy, two guys, volunteer to serve this country, help themselves, their family, help the country out. Deployed to D.C., popular, by the way, even with many of the local residents, because it started to help clean up crime. And then the day before Thanksgiving, you get shot like this. One of the guardsmen was a woman. Terrible. It's depressing. I was hoping to do a stream tonight. It was fun. An hour away from Thanksgiving. I don't know. I just don't know. I don't even know what to say. Even with the bombing of Iran, when I said, look, I was against it. So far, so good. It went about as well as you could have expected. But I said, if Iran was going to retaliate, it wouldn't be through traditional warfare. It would be through acts of terrorism. I'm not saying that's what's occurred here. But along with that, I've been saying, no one knows. Just last night, I said this. We don't know. The elections are a long way away. The news cycle changes so fast, anything could happen. We could have a pandemic. We could have a natural disaster. We could have an act of terrorism. And here we are, 24 hours later. I don't know, man. Well, let me say this. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. We're on the East Coast here. We're 50 minutes away. I have a lot to be thankful for. And it's horrible to think of it this way, but just how quick your life can change. These two poor guardsmen and their families. And so, I guess part of what I'll give thanks to is that God has seen to bless me with this time I have with my family. What have I done to earn that? And so, I am truly blessed and I am thankful. And I hope that God will help heal the families of these people shot. And I think about this stuff a lot. You know, what am I going to do tomorrow? There'll come a time tomorrow I'm going to forget about this. I will. There'll be a moment where I'm hanging out with family and friends. I'll be having good food and I'll forget about this moment. And then I'll remember. And then I'm going to feel guilty. I'm going to be like, how can I sit here having a good time knowing what these two guardsmen are going through and what their families are going through? What am I supposed to do? Sit here and stream and be like, hey, get your donos in. It's weird. Life's weird like that. I remember after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, not only did I not feel like streaming, but I felt grotesque to even ask anyone for any sort of donation. Still feels weird. Sometimes I wonder, am I just going through the motions when I'm like, keep Charlie Kirk in your memory? Am I? Or am I just saying that? I don't know. It's a horrible feeling. So, there's going to be a lot to talk about this. I know there will. And we'll talk about it. I'm not going to be streaming tomorrow. But I'll be back Friday and we'll talk about this. We'll do a call-in show. And we'll give people a chance to say what's on their mind, which helps me. I like hearing what other people are thinking. We'll give people a chance to do that. And then we'll talk about it Friday night, on the show. And hopefully something miraculous will happen. And these people will pull through. And their families will be healed over time. But in a weird way, it does make me thankful for what I have. And so, I just want to say that truly I am blessed and I'm thankful, and I thank God for all that. So, I'm probably just going to wrap up the show here tonight. Because I don't know what else I could say. I'm not super depressed or anything. I mean, it is depressing, but I am going to pray. I'm going to get off and I'm going to pray. And I'm going to try to get some sleep, and then I'm going to focus on hanging out with my family tomorrow. We're going to raid over to Grid Motorsports, who's going to be streaming, and he'll probably be talking more about this issue or some other issues of a political. Maybe he has a debate tonight. I'm not really sure. But please, if you don't do anything else tonight, I don't care if you're religious, what denomination you are, if you are, please say a prayer for these guardsmen and their families, please. And let God hear you, how much we want him to be with these people. So thank you, to Jason Mironchuk for hosting me today. It was a pleasure to talk to him. It really was. Thank you to Avarice for helping run the back end of the show here tonight and popping in, including talking to my friend Chair when I went up to go to the restroom. That's always appreciated. Thank you to everyone who donated. Thank you to everyone who chatted, everyone who liked the stream. Thank you to my editor, Black Elk, and to all of my moderators. You guys are the best. Sorry, I don't know. I planned on staying up till like 2 a.m. and doing whip songs and stuff, but it just doesn't feel right tonight. So, but I know Grid will have some good stuff going on. So remember, no matter how dark and dire things get, never forget this, that God is looking out for you, that your relationship with your family is most important, that no matter how depressing and dire things get, life is still wonderful. Every day we have is. So please don't get blackpilled or anything like that. Who's raiding? Are you telling me to raid someone, or is someone raiding? I would be remiss. I think there were a couple of super chats I missed. The Collector, thanks so much. $5 says, brother, all service members and veterans, me included, would never want you to feel guilty. It's an honor and a privilege to serve. Enjoy your family. Thank you. It means a lot. And the F it button, $5 says, we're thankful for you, Rob. Have a great Thanksgiving and good to hear our on the background reporter check again. Yes. Avarice, he does great work there. So, all right, guys, enjoy the Rated Grid Motorsports. Keep the memory of Charlie Kirk and his family in your heart tonight, and the memory of these National Guardsmen and their family as well. Please pray for them. You guys have a good one. God bless you all. We'll talk to you all soon. Have a happy Thanksgiving as well.
Only in America is it possible to say, you know what, I don't like the way the country is going, and to do something about it. Take that risk. Take that leap of faith. Stay involved. Trust God and act obediently. Romans 12:2 verse. That God will use all things for good for those who love him. It's bigger than you. I want you to remember that. It is bigger than you. It's bigger than me. You are here to make somebody else's life better, the pursuit of liberty and freedom. You know what gives me strength? The hundreds of thousands of you that say, Charlie, keep going.
1 Corinthians 5 and 15. So that's all pretty amazing evidence, not just intra-biblical evidence, but extra-biblical evidence that Jesus Christ was a real person. He lived a perfect life. He was crucified, died, and rose on the third day, and he is Lord and God of all.